my goodness. Well, I'm glad I took the time to test my mic, which I don't always, right before the stream, because I was trying to rebalance the audio a little bit. And when I was testing it, I listened to the output, and the output from my mic sounded like a garbled, incredibly high pitched robot, like you might hear on some animated kids show or something. So I had a mini heart attack, but then hopefully, knock on wood, fixed it. Hey, Grail, good to see you, buddy. Welcome, friends old and new, to Tales of Praxis. I'm your host, Aaron Suduko, the founder of With the Terrible Fate. WithTheTerribleFate.com, if you don't know, is an online publication that is your source for all of the most rigorous, involved, and passionate literary studies of video games. So if you're someone who loves the storytelling of gaming, if you grew up reading those stories the way that other people read novels and films, and you believe that they can or they indeed have shaped your life, your identity, how you see the world, and how you act within the world in myriad positive ways, you've found your way home. That's what we're all about. Originally mostly in long form written content, but increasingly in multimedia form factors, including podcasts, convention lectures, and these wonderful, wonderful live streams we've been doing for the better part of a year at this point. Hey, Pottery, nice to see you back, my friend. Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't ask that, but I'm glad you did, Pottery. Oh, Grail, I'm glad I sound good. Thank you for letting me know. So my inscription update, I am sad to admit, is nil because I spent basically the lion's share of all the time between our last hang and now working on the next article in the Tales of Praxis series, this Tales of Fantasia one that I'm digging into. So I've broken ground pretty substantially on the draft at this point. So I expect it won't be long until we can be chatting about that. But don't worry, the night is young, and based on my first play session of Inscription anyway, I think it's a good kind of late night game to keep you haunted, so I may well return to it before this night is over. I know, I suck, but listen, you don't even have to ask for an update, because I think you can count on me to tell you as soon as anything happens in my playthrough of it. It's the kind of thing you need to talk about with someone, as I'm sure you know. I'm just preaching to the choir. Friends, if you're not as familiar with this particular series as Grail and Pottery are, it's something that I started going on a year ago at this point for With a Terrible Fate. It's Tales of Praxis. It is a literary analysis and philosophical treatment of Bandai Namco's Tales series of JRPGs. It's one that really shaped me as a person and a gamer and a thinker growing up. And so in honor of the remaster of Tales of Symphonia last year, I decided, being a philosopher of video game storytelling now, I wanted to go back, analyze these games, think about the impact that they had on me, the impact they've had on so many other gamers over the years, and really just the language of their storytelling, which is to say, what are the things they're chiefly concerned with? How do they invite their players into those issues, those themes? And how do they empower us to think about deeply human questions and concepts, not just in different ways when we sit down and engage with stories, but also when we go out into the world and try to make sense of who we are, what communities we care about, which communities we belong to, how we want to shape the future, all of those good things. And as I was just alluding to in the conversation, the series kind of has two horns. One you have found here on Twitch. It's this wonderful series of live book clubs where we pick a range of the Tales games, hopefully, I hope, ultimately all of the Tales games, to sit down and work through and study together live in real time. Some of us with encyclopedic knowledge of the series, some of whom are already not even lurking, but actively hanging out in the chat, and some of whom have no experience with the Tales series, but just love the storytelling of video games and want to dig in more with like-minded gamers and discover a new series. And then the other horn is the one I mentioned, the long-form written content, where I drill into some of these games, sometimes singularly, sometimes comparatively, to analyze their structure and the themes they're concerned with in more depth. So you can find those on withtheterriblefate.com. And new to the family, coming very soon, the family of those written articles, will be a study that I'm increasingly excited about, primarily about Tales of Fantasia, but with tendrils that reach out and touch the other of the Azalea games especially, but then also some of the particular moments and characters we've been quite drawn to and excited about in some of the other games we've been playing. So it starts with a character study. It will definitely be more self-contained than some of the other recent things that I've published, but the goal is for it to provide some food for thought and ways of revisiting these games even beyond the boundaries of Tales of Phantasia, which, if you ask me, given that Tales of Phantasia was the game that spawned 1,000 Tales games, is all the more fitting for thinking about our first port of call, analyzing Tales of Phantasia and celebrating its impact on the series. Oh, wonderful, Grail. So you've been working on your writing. I'm glad you rose to my challenge to you. Yes, I would really love, whenever you feel comfortable, if you could share any of your writing with us. Pottery, I still have bookmarked, by the way, that story that you suggested to us at the end of the last stream. So on my list for when Aaron takes a break from all of his other analytical work, Inscription and that web story. So you're loading me up in the best of ways, my friend. And if Grail supports with his own writing, I'll have plenty to keep me busy. I know. Well, I do take other tactical breaks during the day, Grail, for what it's worth. Mostly walking this little nerd. If I can move over here for a second. Yep. My constant supervisor in life, as you all know, Evie the Corgi. And she'll get mentioned on the stream once or twice before we're done with our little intro here. But yes, that's my update, I think, for progress on the Tales of Praxis stuff. Like I said, I went down a bit of a research rabbit hole, but I think I stopped at the appropriate level of depth. So hopefully it will provide at least a new way into thinking about Tales of Phantasia, and maybe a new way of thinking about a concept actually in somewhere in between physics and the philosophy of physics that you might have nominally heard of but not known the origin of. Myself included, by the way. It's a term that kind of gets thrown around in conversations quite a lot these days, but I actually didn't know the academic origins of it. So I learned something that helped me learn something about Tales of Phantasia, and I'm going to try to pass that on to you without getting too far into the weeds to make it less than useful. So that's my update there. Oh my goodness, you're burying yourself in figures, Grail. I love it. Well, I mean, that's as good a transition as any, because if you want to feel better about your purchases, we'll go back to Aaron's show and tell. If you're also new to the stream and unfamiliar with what we've been up to the last few weeks, these live book clubs I've been running since, I think, last March, but we took a pretty unprecedented roughly 2.5 week break from New Year's onward, because I was in Japan actually for the bachelor party of my very best friend Dan Hughes, who oftentimes contributes to the publication, and I'm acting as his best man in his wedding this coming month. So we went on a long overdue return visit to Japan. He's an East Asian studies scholar, as you know, even just based on these streams and everything I've been saying about Tales. A big part of my love of gaming comes from Japan and its culture. So as I've been gradually weaving aspects of the trip and things that I experienced into these studies we've been embarking on together, I've also been sharing, frankly, some of my loot that I came back with. And if there's one thing we learned last stream was it Richard and Hubert fawning over the heroic guardians of Warrior's Roost. It's that being a fan for the things you love is a great thing, and we should celebrate it. So I'm going to show a few more things from my trove that I brought back, and Grail, maybe that'll help you feel better about your figure obsession. That's true. They really are just like us, mega for real. So I told you Evie would be getting at least a couple more shout outs. Like you might have inferred, my dog is named after, in fact, the Pokemon Eevee. So going to Japan and going to several Pokemon centers, of course, I was going to bring back plenty of Eevee paraphernalia, including they have this great collection of Eevee-themed socks, a pair for Eevee and also every one of her evolutions. So of course I got the set, and of course that's basically just what I've been wearing since I've been back from Japan. So this is Vaporeon here, and I think I'm rocking Jolteon. Oh my god, the name jolted out of my head for a second. I'm rocking Jolteon right now at the moment. So that's one. If you didn't notice, or if it's hard from this angle also, continuing on the shirt extravaganza, this is none other than the amygdala from Bloodborne, one of my favorite living horrors who guides you on that wonderful quest. And actually, this might be hard to show on the camera. It has a quote on the bottom, which I love. Oh, amygdala, have mercy on the poor bastard," which says everything it needs to. And if you don't know Bloodborne, I think everyone hanging out in the stream does, but if you don't, you owe it to yourself to play it. Another really cool thing about this shirts that just shows the amount of care that was put into the design, which I love. There's a little tag over here on the sleeve, which you might or might not be able to see at that resolution, that indicates I have 99 insight, which, if you know Bloodborne, is maybe exactly where you want to be, maybe not. It's all in how you look at it. But speaking of how you look at it, adds another nice level of explanation to why we're able to see these horrific amygdalas hanging out on the shirt. So that's two. I think next I wanted to take you quickly on a bit more of a soundtrack adventure, because like I mentioned, and I think I showed a few of these before. Well, I showed the Tales of Fantasia one because that was appropriate, but I'm a huge fan of video game soundtracks. If you're a gamer who has never had the great experience of applying the soundtracks of games to your real life, whether that's just when you're hanging out or working or exercising, I can't encourage you enough to try that. One of the really magical things about video game soundtracks, and this is by no means an original observation on my part, but if you think of the design of that music, especially given the way in which it was designed to support and motivate players working through oftentimes pretty repetitive gameplay loops, it turns out that if you're working through something that's kind of a long haul project in real life, whether that's exercising, like going on a run, or working through a paper, or anything in between, it can be both some of the most beautiful, but also some of the most motivational music out there. So I strongly encourage you to give that a try if you haven't before. Well, Grail, stick around because, I mean, you know me, and I think I can speak for Pottery too at this point, since we've spoken Miyazaki more than once. Stick around on the stream. I'm sure you'll get bullied into playing the rest of it at one point or another. You're such a big fighting game nerd too. I feel like you would be sort of drawn in by the challenge of learning the combat and becoming a master of that. But maybe it doesn't translate. I don't know. So let me show you some soundtracks. And first, I'm going to start with a series that people probably know is near and dear to my heart. Even if you don't know the history of the publication, if you recognize its name, then you know this. The first analytical work that I did and published on video games was a little game called Majora's Mask. So found this wonderful soundtrack collection from the game, and I think with some of the remastered tracks that they did for the 3DS version also. Came complete with a little Majora's Mask pendant, because of course you can never have enough of those. And again, talk about just beautiful insides for a compilation that does justice to the source work of art. I found that, and it was a nice double feature for Majora's Mask stuff, because I was able to finally rectify a hole in my my collection. Because as you probably also know about me at this point, I love to pay homage to the games that have meant a lot to me, both in my life and in my studies, by collecting various things to do with them. And I actually didn't have the original of this in my library, but now I do. The Nintendo 64 Japanese version of Majora's Mask. So love that. Love the great condition in which the box was kept for so long. Oh yeah, Soulsborne Praxis. I mean, don't tempt me, Pottery. I hear, rumor has it, there's going to be some new Elden Ring content in a little while. I don't know, so keep your ear to the ground. Maybe we'll come up with something to do for that. That could be stressful for Aaron, but maybe fun to do in a group setting. The other thing that I love about finding the original copies of games that I have gotten to know after their original release is I get to do things like go back to the original instruction booklets, which are wonderful little windows into not just the game, but also how the game was presented and advertised back when it first came out. So there were a couple things that I loved about this one that I wanted to share with you. And if you know Majora's Mask, then I'm sure you'll be able to appreciate this. And if not, you owe it to yourself to play Majora's Mask at some point, and then read everything I've ever had to say about it, and then get back to me in 5 to 10 years and we'll talk about it. So one little hint that I loved that they gave you was they encourage you, if you're stuck during the game, don't be afraid to try talking to people wearing different masks. And it's in that little tip section that they allude ever so slightly to the famous side quest of Anju and Cafe. So I loved that as a little call out to the other poor cursed child in Majora's Mask. And then I also smiled because at the very end of the instruction booklet, if Aaron can find it, there's this last little page featuring Cremia and Romani from Romani Ranch in that game. And if you're familiar with Majora's Mask, you might know that they are the central figures in arguably one of the weirdest side quests of all time. And I translated the text next to them, and I want to just read it to you verbatim per the translation because it just made me smile thinking about the perspective of this game and everything that has come in its wake as part of its legacy. It says, I hold it up as I read this. This game has many hidden sub-events that are unrelated to the progress of the story up to the ending. Discovering sub-events can be said to be one of the great pleasures of this game. I love the language behind that, the idea of these side quests that don't advance the story as one of the great pleasures of Majora's Mask, a game that, especially if you discovered it as a kid, maybe it didn't give you too much pleasure at the time, and that's okay. But actually, one of the very first articles that I published on Majora's Mask was celebrating its particular approach to side quests, because I do think there is, especially when you consider the cyclical time element in which everything is embedded, a special magic to its approach to side quests and what it is to invest in all of these characters and help make them happy, if only for a moment, or indeed if only for 3 days. So it was nice to see the original instruction booklet encouraging people to go out and explore and learn about that. Oh, I see. So it's more about kind of contingent factors for you getting into the series, Grail. That's interesting. See, I hear excuses when you talk about Switch and open world, and you just have to find the right point of entry into the series, which is probably, I would even say maybe Sekiro for you. I don't know if we've talked about Sekiro before, but I think at this point it's safe to say it's my favorite of Miyazaki's games. That's a tough question to adjudicate, but I have so much love for Sekiro, and when I think about the kinds of things that you love in games and their combat and their storytelling, Grail, I feel like you would get a lot out of it if you haven't tried it before. Pottery, we might have to talk about this at some point because I am so outside the discourse about game randomizers, but I know they're in vogue right now. And actually my buddy and a colleague, Matt McGill, is really into, I think specifically Pikmin randomizers. So he's been telling me a little bit about that. So maybe you can pitch me on why they're so wild and cool at some point. That would be fun. Aliens, that's right. So you know what I'm talking about, Grail. That's one of the most iconic side quests ever, I think. Oh my God, pottery! I'm getting to inscription. So that's my like social proof that you can count on me to actually get through the games you put on my list. So Tunic will be played by Aaron. Just give me time, please. I'm begging you. Oh, well, maybe they're perfect. It'll be a great point of conversation, the idea of randomizers, as we move on to Exilia after this, now that Aaron knows how to play it. Oh, I love that, pottery. So we have some differing opinions elsewhere in the minutiae of the series, but at least we agree on the important things, namely which is the best and why is it Sekiro. One of the greatest joys of my convention lectures that I've given at the various outlets of PAX, Penny Arcade's convention over the years, was the opportunity, actually during COVID when they had a fully online one, to talk about the magic of Sekiro and specifically how it structures its endings to put the player in different sorts of metaphysical positions relative to what Wolf is working through and his story and everything like that. So that exists online, and I'm happy to share with anyone who's interested if it ends up being hard to find. All right, so more of a rapid fire soundtrack adventure next, now that we're through with the Majora's Mask goodness. But first up, since we were getting hyped about Rebirth last time, I had to share with you, I don't know how well this will come through on the camera, but it's not so beautiful on the inside. I don't mean anything more than the literal by that, because the music is beautiful. But on the outside, it's the coolest, like, matte black stencil etched cover of a Final Fantasy VII remake complete soundtrack. So I love the music of the Final Fantasy series, broadly speaking. I love the music of remake, and it was so cool to have such a nice box with the Meteor series sigil on the back to encompass those great songs. So excited about that. If you're familiar with my work, you know that Nier also looms large in it. It's one of the games that I've gotten the most out of, analytically speaking, and is also just one of my favorite stories. And one of the nuts things about it is that Square Enix continues to release new arrangements of basically every song that was ever created for it. So I picked up a few of those new ones, have piano collections, which I'm very excited to listen to. And Grail, I know you asked, like, how often do you actually listen to these things? Nier songs especially I will put on for any occasion, so these will get played into the ground. And a choir arrangement album of Nier Replicant. So some love for Automata, some for Replicant, spreading the love to go around. One of my favorite Final Fantasy games, which gave birth to one of my favorite analyses that I've published in the last few years, Final Fantasy IX. Found a wonderful revival soundtrack of that, which I was not expecting, but it has such great music to score its epic journey through multiple worlds. And then, of course, because they were all waiting for me when I walked into that shop I mentioned last time, Xenoblade Chronicles soundtrack, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 soundtrack, and, of course, the very newly released because of Future Redeemed, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 complete soundtrack. And I loved that because when I finished writing about Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I talked about how overwhelming it was for me to play hundreds and hundreds of hours of these games in order to get ready to publish my study on it and have all the background that I needed. But I didn't really process that, in those hundreds and hundreds of hours playing through these games, it's not just that the music is beautiful, there's also quite a bit of that music. So every one of those soundtracks comes with, I think, at least 5 discs, multiple hours of beautiful scoring with some really nice liner notes, especially when the composers had the chance to go back to songs they had originally written and revise them for new content, like Future Connected, for instance, with respect to Xenoblade Chronicles in the Definitive Edition. Very cool to see that creative process and to live that music. So I've been very excited to crack those as well. Oh, Potter, you're explaining randomizers. Thank you. Hacked ROM that randomizes various elements of games, right? Yeah, it sounds very interesting. So is it designed to like what is the end goal of these randomizers? Is it to turn games into sort of like roguelike procedurally generated things, or just to disorient players? Like, do you have a sense of what the final goal of them is, or is that something that the community is still working out, or perhaps it's just very pluralistic and hard to nail down? Oh, are you talking about like music providers like Spotify, Grail, when you say they refuse to release it on anything? Because yeah, I mean, I have all of these CDs kicking around, so I'm sure I wouldn't know about that. Yeah, blending together Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, speaking as someone who knows them both very well, sounds like it would break your head immediately for more reason than one. So I might have to watch something, some footage of that just to see how it works. It does sound like this randomizer stuff is a cool way, as you say, Grail, to breathe new life into games that you know very well too, and kind of get you to see them from a different perspective. Not unlike what we've been talking about in terms of different ways of playing through a game like a Tales game, and how something like Grail's challenge runs can get you to just see the way that different things are put together in a different light, which is very, very cool. Different goals depending on the player, but common ones are new ways to experience old games, what we were just talking about, and also to test your knowledge of the various games. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so to become even more intimately knowledgeable of their systems. Something that also sounds very Miyazaki, since he was already on our mind. So nice to know that his influence extends beyond his own games, which of course is something we all already knew. All right, and finally, last but not least, before we break back into Tales of Graces, do of course have a few more Tales things to get excited about as we dive in here. So it's a couple more collector's editions. So I found the Japanese version of a collector's edition I already have for a game that I know Pottery's never heard of, but you know, buddy, I'm going to play Tunic when I get a chance. I encourage you to put aside, you know, between 10 and 15 hours. It's a quick game, lots of fluff, but very easy to digest. It's called Tales of Vesperia. Encourage you to check it out. Most of the stuff from it was the same stuff we got in the English collector's edition, with this one cool variant, because like we were talking about last time, I guess acrylic stands are a big and quite popular thing in Japan. So it's this nice one that doesn't quite sit put together, but showing all of the characters from that game we all know and love so much, with a little title card in front of it. Funny, because the screws for the overall stand don't quite fit, so I'm gonna need to go down to Ace Hardware or something and see if I can fix that so I can properly get it displayed. But so that was a nice little addendum to the collection. And the second EV call out, as promised, they have these great stores in Japan called Book Off, which are basically just secondhand repositories of every kind of media you could imagine, from games to books to CDs to DVDs to everything in between. And so I found their Tales section, which was devastating for my suitcase and my wallet, mostly my suitcase because it's just space that's taken up. But I found a really cool edition of Tales of Vesperia, The First Strike. So the kind of prologue movie that they published, giving you more context into Yuri's time in the Knights before he left and everything like that. And I had never seen this art before, which shows Yuri and Flynn and derpy baby Rapide back in the days before he grew up and when he was with his old master. So of course I was going to get a copy of that for derpy Rapide, if nothing else. And then the last thing I will share with you was another variant of a collector's edition I already had, but the collector's edition of Tales of Berseria, that other epic adventure we shared so many hours in together. But another testament to how Japan just gets slightly nicer things than we do internationally. So first of all, look at this box. It's kind of, I don't know if you can tell through the camera, but it's almost rendered as if it's the kind of treasure that you'd pull up on a sea expedition in the desolation. It feels kind of satisfyingly in world, if that makes sense. And then I think I mentioned at the time when I got the collector's edition for the US, it adds this really cool story from Magilu's perspective called A Witch's Tale, relaying some of the events from the past during Magilu's imprisonment before Velvet finds her. So they have kind of the same version in this edition. But first, if you look at how beautiful the cover art is with these different illustrations of all the characters in the party, and then I was looking at it more, and it has that little bonus novelization of Magilu, but it also has a bunch of script details for the ways in which the different events are scripted and the songs that would be scored alongside different things that happen. It has beautiful kind of concept art. If you look at the beginning, you get stuff like this wonderful illustration of Velvet, the kind of stuff that would breathe reality into her before she was finally rendered in the game. And then you have pages and pages of storyboards with the sketches that would give birth to many of the iconic scenes we spent so much time thinking about and working through together during the game. So I would say honestly it was worth getting just for that, because what a cool artifact to get more insight into the creative process, the kind of thing that we just didn't get over here. Yeah, well, I do think it's Lafisette's compass on the back, as you say, pottery, and then I think the dog or the kind of beast on the front, I think is just meant to be a symbol of velvet, because I think it's like, if I remember right, I think it's the icon for Tales of Berseria, period, because I think we get it on the title screen for the game too, if I'm remembering correctly. So I think it's supposed to just be either something specifically referring to velvet or just the symbolism of the Therian more broadly. I don't think it's as clear cut, referring to a specific symbol in the game's world as the compass. That's the best sense I can make of it, at least. Oh my goodness. Well, y'all have already given me plenty of rabbit holes to go down in the randomizer world, so thank you for that. I'm sure the next time I need a break and I'm not busy with Inscription or Tunic or any other amazing web stories that are sent or original work, I'll have something else to explore on YouTube. I'm pretty sure if we were to go back to the title screen pottery, we would see it, because again, it's not something that's in world, but it didn't look brand new to me, for whatever that's worth. All right, friendos. Well, that is my show and tell for you for this evening. So edifying to have been able to experience so much of Japan and also bring back even just the little things like that alternate version of The Witch's Tale that give me a little bit of a different perspective on the things I've already spent so much time on and with. And you better believe I'll be going back to that, especially when it becomes time for me to dive into Tales of Berseria again from the analytic perspective and publish an article on it, which I'm very excited about. Well, we'll have to do some fact finding then, Grail, because I'll need to find where I've seen it before so I can be validated that I'm not losing my mind. Maybe it was just the Japanese symbol for the series, so I'm getting confused with stuff that I've seen online. All right, friends. Well, from the far-reaching to the very specific, you'll recall we are in the fourth act of Tales of Grace's F, the F part, the future part, deep in a research lab in Fodra, beginning to learn the deep history of what happened with the planet's core. We were treated to some footage of the kind that you might expect in sort of the middle third of a horror movie last stream, where we had some cut-ins from scientists getting some feedback from these research expeditions into the core, learning about this organism we still don't know very much about called Little Queen. Maybe it's the mysterious Sophie-looking figure we've encountered a few times who blew down the ship when we were entering Fodra's atmosphere. Maybe someone else entirely, but it definitely had a kind of last known footage vibe to me, where you had a feeling it was, Frankenstein making research notes just before his monster woke up and started tearing things apart. So excited to see where we go from here. My only thought that I wanted to ground our stream with this time around was I just found myself thinking more about that line I dwelled on last time when we were learning about the way in which the energy from Fodra's core was influencing monsters and all of these beings that were born from the core, and Asbel was clearly concerned for the way in which it might influence Sophie and Lambda. And we had this cutaway with Lambda kind of cynically saying to Asbel, "Are you afraid that this is going to make me stronger and I'm going to evolve in a way that I can control you?" And Asbel just said very simply, "No, I'm worried that you might get hurt, and I don't want it to do something to you that would hurt you or Sophie." And I was sitting with that and thinking about it between last stream and this one, and it occurred to me, just in keeping with the broader themes of this fourth act, and in keeping with the themes of birth that we saw last stream, with not one but two births, it seemed like just such a human and fatherly instinct from Asbel at this kind of peak sci-fi moment in the storytelling, where we're learning about the nature in which monsters are evolving, and we're worried about how that might impact Sophie, and maybe Lambda will develop some new capacity that allows him to influence Asbel in new ways. But Asbel, as a father would, concerned about his child growing up, says, no, it's not that I don't want you to evolve, to grow up, to change. I just don't want changes to happen that do violence to you or hurt you, which felt like it was illustrating another color of Asbel's development and enlightenment to me, that even as he was doing the naming of Sophie, giving her a last name to make her daughter, he was already engaged in some pretty active and thoughtful and immediately intuitive parenting with Lambda too, which I quite liked. I don't think I've mentioned this before, but it also occurred to me as I was going back to the Azalea games for this article that I'm working on. We've talked about before how Graces, not Graces F, but Graces came out very closely in time with Dawn of the New World. And so you can see a lot of the colors of one bleeding into the other and vice versa. And it was interesting to me to think that this situation we have with Lambda and Asbel is almost the opposite of the situation we have going on with Emil and Ratatosk, where Ratatosk basically contrives this entire false artificial identity in order to shield himself off from the world and isolate himself and work back to his original strength. And then the challenge of Dawn of the New World is wrestling with what that means for Emil. Is it possible for him to really become human, etc., etc.? Whereas with Asbel, we find this kind of battered, beaten, childlike creature that is Lambda, and Asbel makes this clear-headed offering to Lambda, saying, why don't you join me and come into my body, and I can show you the world as I see it, and you can inhabit my perspective. Shared perspective, by the way, I was thinking about this too, something that has very deep roots in the series. That's not a new idea. It's something that we get as early as, let's say, much earlier games, because I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't played it, but I know at least Grail will know what I'm talking about. So to be able to see all of those different threads come together in Asbel's gestures of unique kindness towards Lambda, I think is something really powerful and cool and worth keeping an eye on as we work on and think about the nature of heritage and lineages and indeed fatherhood as he's representing. Yes, and from the pensive to the outrageous, it is indeed a nice level that Asbel is rocking. That's the most narratively significant thing we can say about this screen for what it's worth. Oh, Grail, even after I tried to help you out of the figure abyss with my own haul, you are already falling further into it. I have no more help for you tonight, buddy. I don't have any other of my my new collectibles within reach, so you're on your own if you mention more of them. I know. Well, you can tell that Sophie is really actively working through this stuff, can't you, Grail? It's an you talked about this last time, but it'll be really fun to step back and do a holistic commentary on Tales of Graces and just like a roundtable conversation with everyone once we're done with this, because this fourth act is so interesting to me in terms of the way it's distributed across these characters, because like we've been talking about with folks like Malik and Richard, I really do feel like it does a great job of foregrounding virtually all the characters in the party, and yet, to your point, it also seems to be very heavily and rightly weighted towards Sophie and Asbel and what they're working through. And it takes a certain deftness, I think, to give everyone their due while also emphasizing some over others. I'm not quite sure how they pull off that magic, but we can think about it and pick it apart. I have faith in us. Ratatosk was an asshole, but also, like, as you say, justified. I would even say more of like bitter and distrusting in a warranted way than an asshole. Like, the more you think about the overall history of the world in which he's embedded and what various parties did to him, like, you're not going to say Ratatosk was right, Thanos was right, whatever, but you're going to understand why he's someone who is deserving of redemption, to bring up that theme that we continue to harp on in analyzing Tales antagonists according to whether or not they could be saved and why that's the case. All right, my dear friends. Well, Happy Hump Day. It's a pleasure to be with you thinking about these wonderful works of art for another evening. And I had a brief and wonderful conversation about this on YouTube earlier, but let's keep an eye on flowers too. And I almost had a fun half thought given our conversations about flowers, like, oh, wouldn't it be kind of fun to do an article that's kind of billed as like the bouquet of flowers in the Tales series, surveying all of the different ones. But so I mentioned it in a comment on the video where we were talking about flowers, but I didn't mention it in that conversation. I was thinking more about the range of flowers and theming that we get throughout the series, and it occurred to me, like, if you go back to the first one, because of course Tales of Phantasia is on my mind, pretty much the last shot that you get in that game, spoilers for Phantasia if you've been sleeping on it for almost 30 years at this point, is a mana seed being sent up from the Great Tree Yggdrasil to Darius Karlon to basically satisfy the wish of Daus. And that seed is very vividly stylized as this beautiful flower that to me is pretty strikingly reminiscent of certain ways in which lotus flowers are represented in Buddhism. And so that struck me too as something that was really special and maybe worth thinking about in more depth, that when you think about the different ways in which the series is oriented around things like world trees and flowers and the natural relationships that undergird the world and the cosmos, thinking about the great seed as kind of the source code or prototype for flowers that would then later be elaborated on in other games, strikes me that it could be an interesting exercise to explore. Well, if you get it back, Pottery, obviously feel free to we can chat about it now, or you can drop a comment on the VOD or what have you. You know, I'm in this for the conversations more than anything. That's why I'm working to push this article out, just because it's on my mind, so I want to be able to talk about it with all of you. So stay tuned on that front too. Grail, I will say the comment section is still very sparse. So if you find yourself watching the VOD or you have further thoughts after a stream and want to comment, I would love to be able to have further asynchronous conversations on the YouTube VODs, but it is definitely a nascent conversation medium for us at this point. But that just means there's room to grow in keeping with the flower and tree theme, and that's the best segue that I can make as we continue to dive into this. All right, my friends. Oh, hard to stay upbeat when we're kicking off a stream when there's this somber, devastating music going on in the background, isn't it? Oh, I'll also say, last thing, as a matter of pragmatics, I was watching the VODs, and I assume this isn't a problem because no one has told me, but the game audio seemed a little quiet to me, to my ear, so I turned it up a little bit. Please feel free to let me know if I overcorrected. As you probably know, it's really easy to change on OBS on the fly, but I don't want to be the only voice you hear. I want you to be able to hear the characters too when they're talking. And now that we finally fixed the audio issues. You'll rue the day I drew my blood. Dude, you gotta speak up if it's quiet. I'm counting on you. I don't have live feedback of the mixing when I'm doing this. Oh, am I going the wrong way? All right, thank you. Well, let that be my my call to action for you now, to let me know if it's better mixed, or if it's still quiet in one direction or another. I can change it and we can get it sorted. I think the challenging thing about this song for me, Grail, not the battle song, but the song as we're exploring, is just that it's such a momentum killer, which I'm sure is part of the point, right? Because this is a place that's kind of been presumably lost to the failures of time and whatever it was that the researchers were trying to do. But because of that tone, it's very hard as a player to feel motivated to continue to work through it. It's the kind of song that makes you want to just sit down and mope about your life, your failures, your inadequacies. Oh, so the way forward was probably the way by the save point. Yes. If Aaron had slightly fewer balls in the air, he probably would have caught that the first time. I'll also say for your benefit, Grail, while I have not progressed in Inscription, I accidentally gave myself a little insomnia last night, I think, because I worked out way too late in the day. So rather than just lying in bed awake with nothing to do, I grabbed my Vita and I did play through the end of the Battle Tower, which was very, very cool. So thank you for encouraging me to get over my own inertia and continue to work on that. Got me reinvigorated to continue plowing through hearts. Big Zelos energy in that purple friend of ours you were mentioning last time. I think I love him. I hope I get to see more of him. But no spoilers, because I played through the end of the tower and then stopped right there because I was ready for bed at that point. So good. That cutscene you get at the top, oh, chef's kiss. I think I woke Evie up because she was asleep on my bed, and I was just like, oh, this is so cool!
No one can stand before my blade.
One thing hasn't changed in all the years of Tales. They've always known how to really grab your attention with fantastic animated cutscenes. Well, yeah, because I was thinking about getting the PlayStation TV for it when I was deciding how to play it, but I said to myself, you know, I would love my first experience with this game to be, you know, with the playstyle and the system that was originally given to us in the West. And I've never played anything on a Vita, and I really have enjoyed my experiences with the PSP and other handheld systems, so why not just treat it that way? And it has been great to be able to experience it on a plane, as bedtime gaming, which you all know I'm a big advocate for, just to settle down at the end of the day and clear your mind with a great story.
Not at all.
Don't get me wrong, it's great to have big screens and a variety of options for how to play things, but there is something special about handheld, I think. Core sample log. Alright. Here's something I'll ask you all as I'm continuing to work through this, just so we can have a conversation going while we're doing the dungeon crawling here. Because I don't think we've talked about this before, despite all of the Tales games that we've played. Do you pick the characters who are going to be in your party just based on the strategy that you want to pull off? So saying, all right, I want this profile of healer and this number of meleeers and this kind of caster, stuff like that? Or do you design your party, at least in part, based on the characters you want to focus on in the story or the relationships that you think make sense? Like saying, okay, Asbel has just adopted Sophie as a daughter, so it makes sense for them to spend time in combat together working through things. I ask this because the subject of my Tales of Fantasia study is a character who is all the more interesting to me because I basically never used him, and I think that says interesting things about how he's represented in the story. And then also this most recent part of Hearts that I played through required you to divvy the party up, kind of similar to what you would get in a Tales of Symphonia, where yeah, you kind of have to think it through in terms of tactics, but also based on the divisions that you choose, you get different skits and different conversations between characters that influence bonds differently. So I think it's interesting to think about why we organize our parties in the way that we do and what we learn from that in terms of battle competencies, but also in terms of the relationships between those characters. I don't know if I have a settled answer on it for myself also. I feel like it's something that I just kind of do intuitively, which I imagine has to do with both gameplay and story, knowing me, but I think it's the kind of thing that would be cool to render more explicit for ourselves.
It's strange how they can preserve records from 1,000 years ago in a machine like this. Truly impressive.
Sophie was born around the time these records were made, and she's been alive ever since.
Such a long time. It makes it easier to understand her desire to become human, and her desire to not be left behind.
I feel the opposite. Whenever age takes its toll on me, I yearn for the power to stop time.
Oh my gosh, I would love to be able to stop time.
So even you feel that way, Pascal?
Heck yeah! Whenever I get dirty, I think about stopping time so I won't get any dirtier, and I'd never have to take a bath.
When you say things like that, your suitors may start to lose interest in you.
Suitors? What suitors?
What? Oh, well,
Oh, nothing.
Hey,
Probably just the
Hubert,
wind.
Why don't you answer?
Me? Why do I? I mean, for me, see, that's not particularly a problem.
of course not. We all know you're...
Addicted to her aroma.
Ugh, that's so gross. Thank you, Malik. I'm glad we're on the same wavelength. Not surprised. Yeah, what you mentioned about Abyss also makes me think, Grail, because this is something that happens to me, and I wonder whether it happens to you too. I get so used to the combat flow and also just the interpersonal dynamic between the first group of 4 that you get in a Tales game that then it becomes very hard for me to be motivated to swap one of those characters out for a character we get later on. I almost feel like I'm doing an injustice to the original party that I got, if that makes sense. Which is tough because sometimes the most interesting characters, either from a narrative or a gameplay perspective, or both, come in later. See, for instance, Regal in Tales of Symphonia, who I wrote that whole study about, right? But it's almost similar to what you were saying last time, Pottery, about how you always prioritize playing as the main character first, and you feel like there needs to be a design solution just for you to get around that. I kind of feel that way about the issue of the first 4 characters that you get defining your party. On the first playthrough, at least. And then, of course, part of the magic of these games is they encourage you in so many ways to play them the second time, and then I don't feel that pull quite as much.
I never dreamed Emerald would be involved with all this.
If she were still alive, she might have been able to help us resolve the situation.
Yeah, that's fair, Grail. It is nice to get into the variety
wait a
that way.
minute. Sai doesn't know Emerald's dead, does he?
Emerald told him to take care of things while she was gone. He's probably been waiting for her the whole time. I thought he needed to know, so I told Sai what happened to Emerald.
Yeah, I respect that,
Sophie,
Grail. I'm still trying to get better
I
about
said
that.
she won't
Thanks to
come
you.
back, and he won't see her again. He seemed to understand.
I wonder if he's capable of understanding death. Sophie's words are clear. She won't come back, and he won't see her again. Although that's not all there is to it.
No, that's not all. Death also brings an enduring feeling of loss that takes hold in the hearts of those who continue to live on.
It makes me wonder if Sai's capable of such emotion.
I doubt it.
An enduring feeling of loss for those who remain. I wonder if that's what I'm starting to feel. This murky fog building up in my chest.
I'm going to keep pounding the drum of why this is such a cool fourth act, and there are so many reasons, but among those reasons is the fact that while so many stories obviously deal with death, and of course that's not an unusual thing in the Tales series, what I think is a little rarer and really cool to see being brought to the fore here is characters being forced to very directly confront the meaning and impact of death for the first time. Because oftentimes I think there'll be character death and, the survivors have an awful time with it and have to figure out how to move on. But even then, it's not like they're staring the concept of death in the face and trying to understand what it means or what it will take for them to personally understand it and live in full awareness that they will die someday. So to see these characters so overtly wrestling with it, like we just saw in that skit, I think is a really mature and bold take for a game like this to be focusing on. Yeah, pottery, I'm with you. I think, and I'm not surprised that you would say that because that also feels like such a Vesperianism. The idea that because like it helps with encouraging you to use other characters in your party, it also supports, at least in many ways that you could slice it, the individuality of each characters, right? Where if it makes sense for characters to have their own missions and interests, it makes sense that they would go off in the absence of the rest of the party and do something on their own for a while and then come back together. Of course, there are also many obstacles that you could stand up to prevent characters from being in the party, even if they would rather be in the party. But I think it very naturally feeds into and supports the kind of individualism that we've talked about in Vesperia before. Rebirth is still on my list. I just need to find a way to play it. Gotta figure it out. We gotta get to all the games. Yeah, it's funny timing wise that you mentioned that, pottery, because that might have been one of the reasons it was on my mind too, because the section I was talking about in Hearts also similarly requires you to put together a party that doesn't include the character you're almost certainly going to have been using for most of your healing up to that point in the game. And of course, when the character is someone like Estelle, it's all the more potent for so many reasons, right? But yeah, especially when you take away core competencies that are key to battle, like a healer, it just totally requires you to reconceive of the game and also the party dynamics in a way that can cascade out to how you understand the characters. Yeah, but that's the beauty of it, Grail, right? You dislike it, but you dislike it usually in a way that is narratively significant. And all I'm going to add to that is stay tuned for the next thing I publish. I'm going to beat on you guys for a second. You have to tell me if the audio is better balanced now, and if you need me to fiddle with things, please let me know, because I don't want the characters to be like horribly muted in the background compared to Aaron talking.
Control room. Let me try something.
The game could? All right, let me try turning it up a little bit. Let me know if I overcorrect. Jesus.
No, maybe.
What is that?
It's completely different than Affinia's Lestalia.
It's like it's alive.
Something's wrong. Get back, quickly! Pascal! What's going on?
Everyone, look out!
Oh, okay, just turn all the volume up, pottery. Got it. I'll mess around with that for next time.
Seen anything like it.
That might be harder for me to do on the fly. But thank you, that's very helpful feedback.
Coming. Get ready.
I'm trembling.
What is it called? Lilitina. How's that for a name? Any mythological background there, Grail? Or is that a kind of sui generis name? I'm just glad that pottery at least constitutes one person who reliably does watch them, because that makes me feel like it's worthwhile to make the effort to upload them every time. It takes a while, guys. I do it for you.
Asbel.
I was trying to target Richard with that. Oh, there we go. That worked out.
Come, Shadow King. Open the door to despair.
Imagine having obligations that require attention. What a hellish life you must lead, pottery. This is another thing I feel the Tales series does very well. It's just this idea of prototypical primordial beings as certain enemy types. Like, this looks like the kind of thing that could evolve and develop into any number of creatures, but itself is not quite like a fully formed creature. I feel like that's a trope that we get pretty often when we, like, journey towards the origin of time, space, the world, whatever, in Tales games. It's very cool. Very unnerving, but unnerving in a way that is not quite horror. Like, it hits a different palette of emotions. Ancient Roman goddess of funerals and burial. Her name was used as a metonymy for death, and undertakers were known as libitinari. Libitina was associated with Venus, and the name appears in some authors as an epithet of Venus. Alright, so playing right into that theme of death. I love that. Like the way the boat in Apocalypse Now is named the Erebus. Speaking of great extended metaphors for death and dealing with it. So interesting too that a creature named after death would be presiding over all of those seemingly dead automata too.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, you know, Apocalypse Now, the very poorly received film adaptation of the wildly popular Spec Ops: The Line. Captain Martin Walker has entered the chat, and he's going nuts. I fully believe that, Grail. I was happy enough on normal human difficulty, though. That didn't strike me as an unwinnable fight, like some of the ones in this game have. No, it was famously not poorly received. I was being sarcastic. It's like one of the most critically acclaimed movies of all time. Excel finalities. That's a cool name for a technique. Excel mode can be activated anytime the Excel gauge is between 50% and 100%. However, if you wait until it's entirely full and you have the right skill in your arsenal, you can use an Excel finality by holding L1 in the middle of a combo. These special arts become stronger every time you use them. Oh, I see. You're being pedantic. No, I think it was both. I was reading the chat too flippantly. I am not a film scholar, but my understanding is that it was famously both. Yeah, I don't think it was one of those pottery, but like I said, that's just my intuition talking. I'm certainly not a scholar of it. So, Grail, are these the same things as the Excel Mystic Arts that you were talking about, or is this a different technique altogether? The Excel finalities, I mean. Got it. Super.
We did it.
What was that?
I don't know, but one thing is quite clear. Something's wrong with Fodora's core.
But with the device broken, I don't know if we'll find out more.
Pascal, any ideas? Oh, I know!
Why are you pawing at that humanoid?
I want to access any information it recorded while it was still functioning.
Your little queen sample is most appreciated.
Oh, that's Emerald.
Are you sure this will allow us to finally defeat Lambda?
Yes, it will be the final piece in Protos Hace's creation.
Please don't be hasty with your investigations, Emerald. We don't even know what the little queen
jump to conclusions.
Well then, perhaps you would rather sit back and wait for Lambda's monsters to destroy us all.
Don't be ridiculous. Yeah, who wants that? Why do you think I decided to summon you in the first place?
A very wise decision it was on your behalf.
No one must know about the Little Queen situation.
Don't worry, I understand. Believe me, I promise you, the last thing I want to do is start frightening everyone.
Fodra, tell me, what is it that you want?
Oh, so he referred to the Little Queen itself as Fodra. I wonder if there's a sense in which she's the avatar of the planet.
What was all that?
As well as ostensibly Sophie's mom,
Looks
if I
like
was
it took
following
place
that right.
before Sophie was born. So the Little Queen was actually that girl inside of the core?
That appears to be the case.
But the question is, who is she?
Exactly. And why does she remind me so much of Sophie? I don't know her. What is going on? I don't understand it.
Emerald said that data from the Little Queen would complete Protos Haste.
Protos Haste. That was my old name.
I think we better move this discussion outside.
Wait! I want to grab the data from that other humanoid!
Pascal, hurry! No, now what?
Oh! I have a thought about that, Grail, so put a pin in it.
Is that her?
Who are you?
Someone who's not interested in talking.
Wait! Please stop! We don't want to fight you!
Stay back! Cheer up!
That's a very cool three-way block.
How did you... Child of Fodra. Huh?
She can speak.
Come to me.
Watch out, Sophie!
Watch out! Everyone move!
Pascal!
Almost there! And done!
Sophie! Come on, let's get out of here!
Visual data extracted from a humanoid at the Elith Research Laboratory. Yeah, my thought before we move on was we can definitely lampoon the characters for being thick at moments like that and trying really hard to work through things that seem quite obvious, like the idea of Little Queen being something like the mother of Sophie. But I almost feel like in the context of this act specifically and everything that Sophie is trying to work through, there's almost like an optimistic way you can read it in terms of saying maybe it's not so much that it's taking them a while to put the pieces together, but rather that they're giving Sophie more space to just work through the implications of what it is that she's seeing and understanding it on her own terms before she says it out loud. Because if you think about it, right, that's something that is deeply personal and existentially impactful, this idea of coming to understand who your mother is for the first time. And you can almost see that in the great animation and line readings of Sophie, where it kind of seems like she recognizes her on this intuitive, maybe even biological level, even though she's never really met her before. So it feels like a very Tales party vibe to me, that everyone else would just kind of almost intentionally stumble through putting the pieces together in order to give her the space that she needs to make sense of it herself in the first personal way. Ah! Oh no! It's a dangerous place. Will's Carta. My real occupation is that of a natural historian. Alright, there's another one I know. Jesus. It's like the lightning in Volt's temple turned up to 11. Run.
Remember your training.
Sorry about that.
I was afraid for a moment that those floor spikes would follow us into battle. Which would have been pretty cool if I'm being honest. I know, I'm thinking the same thing. It would be awful, but it would be the best kind of awful, you know what I mean? Oh, this is a great track too. Just pausing to listen to it for a sec. Little queen, please. We're very frail. Oh, that's cool, seeing it penetrate the different layers like that. I'm hoping we can get out this way now. Maybe? Yes! Excellent. Oh my god! Whoa! That's so cool! Again, awful, but so cool. Jesus Christ! Oh my god! What the hell? Oh, what the hell? And here I thought we would be safe from enemies. I was naive. Yeah, that would have taken too much forethought though, Grail. Let's be real. At least we have the revival stuff built in, so that helped.
What's our motto? Never give up!
Oh my god, I'm not prepared to go back to the madness, please. This reminds me a little bit of some of the puzzles at the very end of Tales of Eternia, which stand tall to me as some of the most frustrating and challenging yet rewarding ones in the series that I've encountered so far. I'm just gonna try to avoid that surprise in battle as much as possible. God, this is hard! Okay, we're at least near the end of the hall now. No, it's not my style, Grail. You know me by now. Here's my counter. Did we make it through? Yes, we did. That's all that counts.
Get on board.
Let's go.
Sophie, hurry!
That almost sounded like a Lambdaism coming out of Asbel's mouth.
Asbel, hurry!
Oh, thank God. Awesome. Yeah, and what a cool point of contrast from when he was possessed by Lambda, right? And also a great echo of two of the greatest moments in Tales of Arise.
Thanks, Richard.
You're lucky you aren't dead.
I agree. That was extremely foolish, my brother.
Regardless, he's safe. But who was that girl?
Say
I
it,
don't
Sophie.
know, but she feels somehow familiar.
Sophie? What is it?
Oh no, we're falling into the Tales soup, Grail. Who will save us?
Hurry, Pascal!
There are kind of two of him in there right now, if you know what I'm saying.
We're not safe yet. We're not?
Arcadia Garden. This must be where we saw Little Queen before. Yeah, welcome to the bad ending.
There are flowers here as well.
It reminds me of the meadow and lot.
Took the words right out of my mouth, man.
It's weird. These flowers. I don't know. It's like I'm looking at a painting or something.
Ooh, so I've been saying over the last few streams, I wonder how deep Act 4 is going to go into explaining the history of the world, since so much of that was out of focus, rightly so, during the first 3 acts. And I just had this thought of wondering, is it going to go deep enough to explain, like, maybe there's some sense in which this primordial meadow is part of the essence of Little Queen, and so part of the reason that Sophie showed up at the meadow in Lot Hill was because it like resonated with her source code and her origins in this meadow. That would be nuts if they went that deep but tied it into the themes we were considering in a way that had emotional resonance. And I wouldn't put it past them, knowing these games as we do.
I know what you mean. We're surrounded by nature, and yet it feels very unnatural.
How goes the shuttle? Think we can take off soon?
Yeah, no. Sai's working on it, but it's gonna take a while.
Hey, Sophie. Try not to wander off.
Okay, goodbye.
She's calling me.
That's not what you want to hear. I woke up my Google Assistant somehow.
She wants me to come this way.
I'm wondering almost whether it's some kind of like a synthetic backdrop that was constructed without the use of any eleth. So it's like a facade representing nature without actually being grounded in eleth the way all organic life is in this world. That strikes me as something that would explain how they're feeling and why it would be so unnatural.
Are you still hearing voices?
For what it's worth, I don't think she's imagining it.
Well, we've got some time. Let's take a look around while Sai works on the shuttle.
Thank you, Grail. I will absolutely do that before we venture forward into the scary garden. We haven't done religious iconography in Tales of Graces for a while. I wonder how much this will or will not evoke the garden with a capital G.
Emerald said Fodra had been destroyed completely.
And yet, even after everything, this was here all along.
Looking back, Emerald tried to merge with Lambda and gain his power in order to bring new life to Fodra.
But Lambda refused her, despite her wishes.
And her efforts were for naught, as new life had already taken hold.
I feel sorry for Emerald.
Yeah.
Have you forgotten that Emerald planned for Sophie to sacrifice herself in order to destroy Lambda?
Thank you.
And that she was the main cause of Lambda's pain in the first place? How can you feel for her?
I do. I sympathize with her being forced into making such a cruel decision. Maybe we can honor her memory by seeing this world through to a brighter future.
So very Asbel.
I was actually going to say so very
That's
Lloyd.
what I love.
But I love the way he finds villains sympathetic. Reminds me of that perspective of Lloyd's from Dawn of the New World, of all places, but which I've been dwelling on and thinking a lot about, where he basically reimagines the mythos, if you will, saying, yeah, you know, he didn't agree with us, but at the end of the day, I like to think he gave his spirit to the New World tree, and that's why I named it after him. That's such a Lloydism, which I really heard in what Asbel was saying there with regard to Emerald and helping this world to flourish even after her death. And after her going about the wrong means to achieve that end. It's interesting you say that, Grail, because I don't know. I think there's definitely something interesting about what is antagonistic about Lambda, like we were talking about last time, where it almost seems like most of the problems he causes in the world are born from his expectation of conflict rather than a conflict that is brought about by his disagreement with someone else over the way in which the world ought to be. But I kind of feel like in the broader question of villains who aren't completely 100% evil, as you say, that almost strikes me as something that is like characteristic of the Tales games more broadly. Like certainly you get some properly evil folk in these games, but I think part of what to me is really cool about them is more so than many other video game series that you'll encounter. I feel like oftentimes it's the case that the villain is really trying to do something that has to be stopped, but also is pretty sympathetic seen through one lens or another at the end of the day. Even Mythos, like I think it's right to say that Mythos is not the kind of person who could be redeemed based on his perspective and the actions that he took, but you can still understand and kind of sympathize with how it is that he arrived at that position. And again, since I'm living inside of Fantasia right now, that's certainly something that goes back to the start of the series, I would say, in terms of like Douse being someone who certainly has to be stopped, but whose mission can also be achieved at the end of the day for good reasons, even after his death, you know? Let's just go ahead and do the weapons real quick, and then we can move on. Yeah, as I said, I mean, I think there's something to the Emerald mythos comparison, at least in terms of like the kind of antagonist on the villainy grid that they both are. Okay, let's just do that. That's an interesting idea too, because we talked about that with Tales of Symphonia back in the day, how sometimes like supporting second or third tier villains seem more morally reprehensible than the big bad in these games. Like we talked about Kavar and Varley as sort of the morally evil center of the Tales of Symphonia universe, even more so than someone like Mythos. And you could probably say something similar about Richard's uncle. But again, notice, I mean, if these games teach you anything, I think it's well, no, not the single thing they teach you, but one of the important things that they teach you is how much the framing of the story that's told about someone can influence how you feel about them and what you think about them. And I think part of the problem for poor Richard's uncle is that he's so in the periphery of the story, so presumably he has his reasons for what he did and why he believes he was right. But in the story that is told of Asbel and Richard and their journey together and the arc that they go through, those reasons don't even come into the discussion, and so are kind of biased from the get-go against Richard's uncle as this kind of just Shakespearean stereotype of the evil usurper, you know? Alright. I think that'll do us. Compulsive Collector and Collector King. Oh. Speaking of art imitating life. Now between those titles and their fanboying over the Warriors Roost Guardians last stream, they really have our number right now, don't they? I wanted to check whether Asbel actually has his, oh, what do they call it, Excel finality now? Yes, he does. Awesome. All right. I'll try to see if we can do that next. And of course we have Malix on the list, like we were talking about last time. I think certainly pottery, but I think there's also like an interesting difference to unpack, and the Tale series to me strikes me as really fertile ground for this in terms of what is the difference between a reason that you, as sort of a third-party observer, can understand and relate to and sympathize with, and understand like, okay, that's a good reason or a good end, even if you're going about it in the wrong way, pointing again to someone like Douse, versus saying like, okay, I can understand why, given your psychology and everything that you've been through, you would take that as a reason, but from the outside and outside your point of view, that's something that's morally reprehensible and has to be stopped, and there's nothing to recommend it to anyone beyond yourself. You know, I think that kind of consideration of what makes something a good reason for a particular person versus a good reason that's accessible to everyone is a big part of kind of the praxis and thinking through the philosophy of action that these games are so thoughtful about.
I've never seen such beauty, not even on Infinia.
I feel the pull of that question, Grail. Based on what we see of Richard in childhood, I feel like he, like even if he realized and believed that his uncle had to be ousted, you would think that he would imprison him and try to reason with him or enact a punishment that wouldn't perpetuate war, but rather put an end to the feud. That's my intuition, at least. We can come back to it when you've thought more about it, Pottery. I think there's a pretty stark difference.
You're right.
Have a good dinner. We'll see you for the Friday stream. Looking forward to it. Pleasure to be back in a regular rhythm with you, my friend. Hopefully I'll have an update for you on Inscription at that point as well. So hold me to that.
But why is this area the only one covered in flowers?
It's probably filled with concentrated eleth or something.
Oh, those same creatures.
Look at that.
I've never seen peaceful monsters before.
Those same keepers of death whom we brutalized earlier.
What's happening here? Come with us, child of Fodra.
Oh, dope. The title track. I knew this sounded familiar to me. Have we heard it in the game before? Maybe, but I don't remember when we would have. Yeah, the menu theme. That's the more accurate word for it. Thank you, Grail. Interesting that they chose to put it here of all places. Can't you believe they made them just for this scene, though, Grail? I mean, that seems like exactly the kind of thing this team would do, and I kind of love it. Defender of Life, yes, thank you for the reminder.
Alone, do you? Huh? Someday, all of these people will be gone. It will be sad. It will be frightening. Help me. I don't know what to do.
This reminds me a little of all the Helganquil manifesting in Tales of Arise.
But we will soothe your troubled heart forever. What? We, all of us, we will take the place of your pain. Let us spend eternity together. Together?
An end to suffering. To paraphrase the White Witch in Ni no Kuni.
They're gone.
The hell was that?
Was it some kind of illusion?
But it felt so real.
Yeah, it felt that way to me too, Grail. It'll be interesting to see if it comes up again.
Sophie, hang on. I know her. Huh? And she knew me too. My head. It hurts.
Take it easy, Sophie. Rest for a minute, and then we'll head back.
No, I have to see her again.
I know that feel, buddy. I've been there many a time, so don't worry about it. And the good thing about being two writers who are familiar with that is I just auto-completed the word in my head, so no love lost.
She's waiting for me. Please, Asbel, I have to talk to her. I can't stop thinking about what she said.
All right, let's go.
How's the balance, Grail? Have we fixed it, or does it still need tinkering with? Yeah, look at those little bunnies hopping around. I love that. And squirrels. Fantastic. All right, well, glad we solved that problem at least. So I know Pottery's gone, but I also know Pottery's going to watch the VOD. So just to put a button on what we were talking about before. And Grail, you can tell me whether you feel the pull of this too, because I am confident that there is something here. I'm less confident that I'm perhaps explaining it in the most intuitive way. But while we're working even just within the oeuvre of Tales games, what I was pointing to in terms of different kinds of villains and whether or not we can really understand and fully sympathize with them was something like, again, just as a toy example, the difference between Daus and Van, right? Looking at Tales of Fantasia versus Tales of the Abyss, where with Daus, we can recognize, yeah, you did all the wrong things. You killed a bunch of people. Your means were totally reprehensible and you have to be stopped. But your goal was to bring energy and life back to your dying planet. And we can understand why that's a reason that someone would do something. And that's a good reason that would speak in favor of itself, even to us who are not from your homeworld, which is why we can feel justified in giving Darius Carlon a mana seed at the end of Tales of Fantasia, right? Versus, like, the gang isn't going to get together and fulfill Van's wish of recreating Hod in this replica world at the end of Tales of the Abyss, right? When you learn the history of Van and understand everything he's been through and how he was tortured as a kid and everything, certainly we can understand why he would be worked into a headspace where he feels like the only way out for himself is to enact this whole replica scheme of creating the world and doing away with all of the originals. But it's the kind of reason that is only accessible to someone who has been through exactly that trauma, and to everyone outside of Van, they're going to recognize that as something that is not a good reason and doesn't speak in favor of anything that they would want to do or bring about. Maybe with the exception of the God Generals, but the God Generals, importantly, being so tortured for their own reasons that they would support Van as a way of coping with everything that they've been through individually. So that's the kind of distinction that I was talking about. And I do think that it's useful for codifying different kinds of antagonists that we encounter in stories more broadly, but certainly in the case of JRPGs, where oftentimes the final antagonist is very complicated, has a lot of reasons, but there's a myriad of ways in which we can relate to or feel as though we ought not to relate to those antagonists. And I think that framework can be helpful for breaking down some of those differences. Sync basically symbolically just wanted to throw the world into a volcano the way he was thrown into a volcano. Yeah. Kind of, when you put it that way, a little bit of a like an early stage model for Volron, you might say. I get a lot of the same, just like unbridled and bitter anger from Sync that I do from Volron, and they were both kind of used for larger purposes and turned into puppets in pretty similar ways. Area 1. Ooh, we have invisible barriers. I have good news, Grail. After ages and ages, Ratatosk finally decided that he agreed with you and he was going to get rid of that mana plague. Speaking of hashtag Ratatosk was right. When, at the end of the day, his plan is the one that makes the most sense for the world. I was thinking the same thing in terms of Little Queen's line reading, by the way, Grail, just catching up on your messages. Yeah, I think there's something... you know what was really cool about it to me? It evoked so strongly the early game line readings that Sophie had when she was trying to understand emotions for the first time. Like, oh, if this happens, will Asbel be sad? Does smiling mean you're happy? When she really had no point of actually relating to or empathizing with people's emotional experience. So, which made me feel like all the more justification for Little Queen being the progenitor or mother of Sophie, right? Because you can see how like Sophie's lineage didn't have that kind of emotional facility. That's something that she gained by virtue of associating with Asbel, her dad, and all of her other friends over the course of her journey. So it's really cool to see that point of contrast between where she began things and where she is now, played out through her confrontation with the Little Queen. Ooh, we got a meteorite. Core Meteor has entered the chat. Richard gained the Malik's Friend title. Oh, I love that. I gotta see the description of that one. Can I get the Malik's Friend title? I want that one. Oh, we should check on that too. It's been a coon's age, hasn't it? Richard's titles is what I'm looking at. Oh, he's getting a bunch of friendship titles. That's such nice closure for Richard after all the madness he went through with Lambda. Oh yeah, and he absorbs different abilities from them based on spending time with them. That's so cool. I love that. Alright, arts for Asbel. Well, there's the Excel finality, but other than that, it looks like we have all the same arts. Do you have any suggested updates to the palette, Grail? Because I'm more than happy to rotate things out. 2 spells learned from Malik and Pascal. Which ones are you talking about? Oh, or are you talking about Richard? Oh, hilarious. That makes more sense. I was like, I didn't think Asbel could cast spells. Excellent. Well, I want him to get his Excel finality, but after that we can prioritize those. Ah, giant teddy bear. And we can talk to him? Wait, what? A hungry-looking bear is standing there. We don't have anything you would enjoy. Ah, puzzles.
I'm trembling.
We need to find food for the bear in order to get to the treasure chest. I'm getting some near forest vibes from this garden journey we're on. It's a very pointed comment. I just really like the flow of the assault arts. I will say it's been very nice in arts just to have a single type of art to manage. Like that, I've said this before, that makes much more sense to me than the art splitting of something like Graces. Even though, like, I can appreciate the system, but it just doesn't naturally gel with my head in the way I think about these things as well. I can do the thing. The thing being going back to the bear. Did we get something he would like? Not that thing. Oh, you're talking about Asbel's Excel finality. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think that is part of what makes it frustrating for me. It just messes with his inertia. Here, take these otherworldly seeds, bear. But he still seems hungry. That's rude. I just fed you, dude. You're gonna make me feed you even more? That's just not appropriate. I think this is back the same place where we were. Yeah, I was just starting to get that feeling, Grail. Meteorite. Alright, a stone that was previously an unidentified object. Whether it's awesome or not is a secret. I like that description.
Be careful, everyone.
This is a hard area for me too, because having just gone through the garden where all of the monsters are sweet and docile, to have to kill them all in battle now feels even more brutal and unwarranted than it did before. Especially when they're cute little quackets? Like, look at that. Cute name, cute type of creature. It just feels gross. That was so cool. And the decisiveness where he called Lambda and said, "You and me, Lambda." Really cool.
Traveled back in time from next week. Please stop throwing monsters at us.
Alright, so I'm still not happy about having to go through these battles, but that was very cool. I'm happy about the growth that Asbel has gone through, at least. Yeah, but still, I almost feel like I'd be better off just running away, even if they run into me. Gruen's Carta. Oh, come now, let's not worry about little things, okay? Now, if only I could find my way back to that bear. It is really interesting that all of those Excel modes and abilities transfer back to the base game, because it strikes me as the kind of ability that is so grounded in and explained by the events of the fourth act. And so the idea that it could then be transferred to all of the events that preceded it really boggles the mind. But the very fact that, as you're saying, Grail, they changed some of the language around the arts with an eye to that just makes me have more trust in the way in which they transposed them, and makes me more interested in the way that they did it too. Reasons to New Game Plus. Shirley's Carta. They have offered their hand. Getting me all hyped up for my Legendia run. Graces. Okay, back to... I hope it's the same bear. I have more seeds for you, bear. Will you leave me alone now? You're still hungry? Oh my god. This bear is my final boss. I cannot see my way into empathizing with any of his reasons. I'm stubborn right now. Let's see how much more wandering I have in me. And then if we need a map, we can do that. I appreciate you asking. Oh, butterflies. There's something I know all too well. Strange butterflies. All right. So my my likening of this to the Ymir Forest was even more telling than I realized at the time. Now I know what to do. We don't need a map. It's fun that they reused the exact same navigational hint. Absolutely. I'll switch to Malik after this battle so he doesn't accidentally use it when I'm not looking. I was thinking about Malik and just sitting in appreciation of Jamieson Price earlier today, as I often do, but talk about having a cool and diverse career even within the Tales series. Like, he's played supporting characters in the battle party, like Malik. He's played 4 general style villains, like Largo in Tales of the Abyss. He's played the main final big bad, like Duke in Tales of Vesperia. I think really the only accolade he hasn't acquired yet is main character, and God knows I would play the hell out of a Tales game with him voicing the main character. But I kind of feel like Nier Gestalt, the original version we got of Nier where he voices the hero, scratches that itch a little bit for me, even though it's a very different game, obviously. Different game, but concerned with a lot of the same stuff at the end of the day, I would say. Eradication Bloom. Aftermarket upgrades.
Look at the giant flower. I sure wish I could grow big like that.
Sophie, you want to grow bigger? I imagine Pascal might be able to help you with that.
Really? Hey yo! You rang?
Sophie wants to get bigger.
That's easy. You'll be like 50 feet tall by the time I'm done with you. Absolutely not. But it'd be so cool. Why not? She wouldn't fit into her clothes anymore.
That is your reason?
Fine. You're so irritable, Sharia. Jeez. How's about I keep her small and just make her eyes fire laser beams? Are laser beams fun?
Definitely. Sounds like fun
Hit
to
me
me.
with
No
those laser beams.
either. Rocket punch? No.
But maybe. Oh, Grail, my man, you're so sweet even to think of that. Even just the fact that you thought of that makes my day. Forget about whether or not it actually happened. But yes, he's one of the few guys I'd really be excited to take advantage of on Cameo. Because, his voice, it's just the perfect voice acting. That's all there is to say about it. I'm sure there's plenty more I could say about it, but that's the long and the short of it. Okay, there are the butterflies. Butterflies, my love!
This'll be tight. Keep it cool. Cloak of ice.
Fall before me!
Darkness, behold.
Lightning blade!
Pulled it off, somehow.
Wanted to see if there were stronger things we could put on his spell palette. That felt pretty flaccid to me. What is something big and scary? Frigid coffin? Frigid coffin. Ella flare? Culling flare? Okay. I like both. Let's do both. Oh man, Grail, you have my number. That would be like the perfect thing to commission from him too. He's great, and I'm telling you, if and when I finally make another plunge into Persona 5, it's mostly just going to be for the honor of enjoying more of his voice acting. I would follow that guy's career to basically any story he wants to bring to life. It's been on my mind too because in the US this weekend and last have been the theatrical releases of the Gurren Lagann movies, which I don't know if they had ever been aired in the US like that before, but it was one of those Fathom events, which unfortunately I wasn't able to make it to, but one of my many favorite roles of his is as Lord Genome in Gurren Lagann, which I don't know whether he did it for the movies too, or even if the movies were dubbed or if they were just subbed, but he gives a great performance in that. Well, they seem to be leading us somewhere, at least so far, and we haven't terminated that path yet as far as I can tell, so let's see where they're trying to point us, and then we can kind of go from there if we end up getting lost.
Nice, Richard. That was impressive.
Well, I'm nowhere near your level, Asbel.
Oh, the Dark Turtles voice actor. Hilarious. Yes, that is my one final goal. We could have made a bunch of really campy jokes together about Cysteria and Berseria. Okay, so that's... Well, let's see. If we go through the portal by the butterflies here, will that... That's good. We have more butterflies. And a chest we haven't opened yet. Yeah, so we're not at the end of this yet. I think the problem is there are some places you go on the map where, like, if you go in the wrong direction or in the wrong order, then you get like these translucent shimmering walls are sort of like one-way gates, where if you go the wrong way, then you get walled off by them. Like what just happened. I think that's exactly what just happened to me. So now I think we just have to find our way back. But that's okay. I think, so that only happened because I went out of my way to get the chests. And now that we have the chests, I don't think I'll have to do that again. Well, I was trying to remember. Can you be my memory, Grail? Because we've seen these translucent walls before somewhere, haven't we? But I don't remember where exactly.
Let's get this underway.
Alright, let's see a really cool Excel finality first, before we do anything else. Oh, that's annoying. I was holding L1, but it didn't trigger. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna switch off of Malik until he gets up higher in his Excel gauge again. Oh, that's right. We passed through them on the way to the Lestalia to see Lambda's memories. So perhaps something to do with resonating with the core of Fodra or something? Something like that? Because that would make sense as a link to Lambda and also a link to Little Queen, right? I should switch off if I'm in the menu after this. Oh yeah, maybe he just hasn't unlocked it yet. Thought he had. Oh, bummer. That's exactly what it is. Well, we can have him working toward it now. Wait. Richard, I feel like I checked pretty recently, but... Yeah, almost. I think we got an item that boosts their skill points, so maybe we can use that after this on one of them. Alright, maybe it's worth switching to that in the mixer then. Oh, there are butterflies up there. That seems positive.
Let's get this underway.
Promptly forgot to do what I was planning to do in the menu, but that's okay. It is cool how all of the Excel finalities give characters the ability to have big finishers on their own terms in a way that's not tied to the share health break gauge. Like whether or not Asbel's able to pull his off has nothing to do with whether Richard can get his off. That feels like a nice further development of their individual abilities, especially as would be realized at this point in the 4th act of a JRPG. Alright, now, before Aaron runs to those butterflies, let's do the couple things that we were talking about. Okay, and in the mixer, we were talking about the Book of Potential, right? That grants extra CC. That increases Elith capacity. We have the Book of Talent already increasing SP. Maybe we don't need the one acquiring more shards right now. Yes, talk about it, please. I agree. From having done creative writing in the past, there are few things harder than writing really compelling dialogue. So, please, preach your gift to us. Tell us your secret. Oh, Richard learned it? You clocked that? Good catch. Thank you, Grail. Alright. Well, let's... Here. I'll just go ahead and have him do that next so we can knock that one off the list. Okay, I think I did all the things I set out to do that time. Butterflies. Oh, no, but this is the one that just spat us out the other side, so I don't want to do that again. Butterflies. Okay, good, good, good. Yes. And butterflies. And butterflies. Butterflies. It seems like they're just... like there are butterflies that lead you in multiple directions because it's a multi-dimensional maze. Now I feel like I'm too far off the path. Where are the other butterflies? Butterflies? Please. I'm looking for you. I'm going backwards. Alright. Well, then we'll go in the other direction. Yeah, I guess it does stand to reason that we would want to work into the higher numbers of the areas, right? So we want to go from 1 to 2 to 3 and so on. Okay, I think this is the same bear who's been tormenting me this whole time, and I think we have more seeds. Will you leave? I swear to God, do we have more of the seeds? No. You're killing me, bear. You're killing me. Yeah, well, I do recall you mentioning before, Grail, that you're really good at putting yourself enough into characters that then it's easy to imagine yourself as them. And I suppose that's half the battle, right? Like, if you can really imaginatively put yourself into the situation that the character is faced with, and then think, okay, if I were someone like this, what would I say? Then I would have to suppose that's what allows you to be really organic with the expression in a way that makes it sound like something an actual human would say, as opposed to something that a writer wants to put in someone's mouth, which I feel like is the bad side of dialogue. Okay, that's not what I wanted. I don't like it when the walls just pop up. That feels bad. But now I do feel like I'm slowly starting to get a handle on the overall area. After however many misfires. There's that fucking bear again. We still have that song from when we met the Queen going on quietly in the background. I had missed that.
I'm trembling. Why?
I'll settle this. Fall before me, Burning Phoenix!
Simple, but very, very cool. Oh, that is a great benefit, Grail. Yeah, I do feel like so many kinds of writing, creative or analytical or any other kind, can be so helped just by the activity of reading it aloud, especially if you have someone to read it to. Because yeah, when you're, I know this happens to me when I'm in my own head about my writing, like, it might be grammatically sound and it might make sense to me, but unless I actually speak the words, I have no guarantee that it sounds like something that is easy to actually understand or like any human would ever actually say. Shakespeare versus cringe Shakespeare. That's the real distinction, isn't it? Sometimes, dude, I swear it's the same thing with me. Like, I feel as if autocorrect is actively working against me. I don't know why. So now I think I'm heading back in the wrong direction again. Okay. And to the left of the flower just spat us back out. That wasn't a good thing.
We're ready for
Maybe
battle.
there's a down direction. Oh, I was going there. Got me all turned around, man.
No one can stand before my blade!
Alright, well, let's go back the way I was going then. Art Artiste. What a cool title. What title was that for you, Asbel? A title awarded to heavy users of high-rank arts. Knowing when and how to use them is key. Oh, speaking of new arts, we have one on this tree. But I don't want to give up on Exceed. We'll switch to the next one after that. Diabolic Rage. It's a cool name, no doubt about that. Alright, so I was going the right way, but I felt like this path was one that terminated in a wall that trapped me. Yeah, because these were the chests, and then I got trapped in a wall after that. But maybe down here? Oh, I'm twiddling. You can count on the twiddling. I see butterflies there. That seems bad. That's new. That's something. I like that that's new. Oh, this is back where we were before, just moments ago. So that was just like a little loop, I guess. See butterflies over there. This is where we were before, too. I think, unfortunately, Grail, that is probably where we are at this point. But I appreciate you asking. I imagine we can't be that far from figuring it out, because I feel like I've done almost every possible permutation at this point. Okay, we're back on Butterfly Road. So this was what you were saying was the right way.
We will survive.
Ah, keep forgetting to switch off.
Eat this. Death by moonlight.
Way too much of a commitment at this point, man.
You're not doing so bad there yourself, Asbel.
Got a soul orb, I'll take that. Alright, give me my man back. Thank you. Alright. I mean, maybe I just shouldn't be scared of going through these walls, but I am scared. The butterflies. Area 4? That seems different. Area 5! Okay, I think I found the right path. That's my secret, Grail. I'm always scared. Why do you think I'm wearing an amygdala on my shirt? It's just very confusing. This is an interesting, maybe an interesting commentary on, like, challenging level design too, but challenging in an interesting way. The way that these warp walls are sometimes traps that send you back to places where you don't want to be, but sometimes send you further into the area and take you where you need to be. So you never really know when you're approaching one whether it's going to be sending you in the right direction or back to the start.
I bid you good day.
I feel like maybe some of the portals in like the human ranches in Tales of Symphonia were like that, but I feel like that's a pretty unusual thing to encounter in these games. Grail is afraid I'm gonna boot myself all the way back to the beginning now. Well, this seems like we only have one way to go anyway, which is great. Yep, Area 6. That seems very positive. And look, there are butterflies and everything. Alright, I think I found my way through the bottleneck of the puzzle at this point. Area 3? Maybe we're supposed to be back here. Maybe that's not an awful thing that just happened. Yeah, they were pretty rough.
Let's get this underway.
Oh, for real? Those are on turn? How could the double butterflies betray me? That sucks. That really felt like the most unambiguous sign that I had done the right thing. It's so funny that it was the opposite of that. Alright. Where the fuck were we? Alright, so it's down from here. Then over here, I think. No, it's down this way. Yeah, he knows how to hit it. There's no doubt about that. All of the end battle lines. I mean, I know I've been saying this from the very start, but they never miss. Yeah, it's weird and frustrating that it's like, it's half a logic game and half a memory game, as clearly as I can tell at least, because the butterflies definitely guide you, but they certainly don't guide you in as clear-cut a way as they do in Fantasia or Symphonia. Because like many of the turns you're supposed to make are not signaled by butterflies. Or like we were talking about here, like the butterflies are signaling the wrong thing? What? Very confusing. But is that what I did before? I thought you said to go right. But this is exactly what happened last time, right? Do I need to go down instead? Aaron's breaking his brain. Okay, well that at least is a very small circle. Now I have a sense of where it spits me back to anyways. Alright, 5, 6, not that way. So down. Oh, are we supposed to go back through this now? Is that what it was trying to say? Oh, that was not clear to me at all. I'm glad they added in that little zoom of Asbel looking at the wall the second time. Which makes me think they realized that it was not clear because they felt the need to add that in. So then could you make it clearer the first time? We made it. We made it. We've been through worse puzzles together, so... In the grand scheme of things, that wasn't so bad. Grail. Don't be a bad influence on me, man. Please. I need all the help I can get.
I wonder if the person who's been calling out to Sophie is up ahead.
I wonder too. But more than that, I'm just eager to find out who it is. Maybe it's Concatus from the Flotillion.
You got it in one, Pesco.
Wait, what? He's a super evil, super scary shell man that controls humans with his electrowave powers. Shell man?
Oh,
And you know what? He's the boss of the Flotillion.
both of you, stop!
What's wrong, Hubert?
First of all, it isn't Concatus, it's Conkider. Secondly, in the Sunscreen Ranger universe, the villains are not shellmen, they are Shellians.
Oh, right. I forgot little
Hilarious.
bro was such a big fan of the Sunscreen Rangers.
Conkider is not the boss of the Flotillion, he's the boss of the Water Breakers, which is an affiliate of the Flotillion.
I can't follow this at all.
Oh my god. Every little bit of these last two streams just making me feel so seen as a mega fan of gaming and Tales and everything else. It's also interesting that the series seems to have a modest shared heritage with the Power Rangers between that little skit cameo and the Abyss Rangers little Easter egg in Tales of the Abyss. I wonder if that's just like the fandom of someone who works there, or if there's something deeper than that I'm not familiar with. Because the Power Rangers, those are Mattel, right? They don't have anything to do with Bamco. Power Rangers. Hasbro, actually. Hasbro owns it. The franchise. There you go. Today I learned. Still not Bamco. Yeah, must just be a broader popularity thing. I did actually. That's something that I was not expecting, but we saw a lot of Power Rangers statues and content like that when we were in Japan. Ooh, how about that? The side-by-side contrast of the totally desiccated and elifless Fodra versus whatever witchcraft is happening in this garden. That's such a cool shot. You say that, it really does feel like a painted world. Like I'm sitting here waiting for the other shoe to drop in terms of an explanation of why this area is the way it is. I don't think it's going to be a good explanation. Maybe just an illusion?
How do you know me?
I'm not sure. I feel like they faded it out in the background while we were exploring the area. I'm not sure, but I noticed the balancing change too. Yeah. Because it was also louder during their first conversation, and then it just got muted in the dungeon.
How do you know how I feel? How?
The stars bring life. The wind caresses. The earth embraces. Flowers bloom. Life thrives.
Yeah, you got it, Grail. That's got to be it.
Disturbs that circle. Humans.
Oh, is it just going to be Lambda with extra steps? We need to kill humanity?
Come, child of Fodra. Help us kill the humans.
It is Lambda with extra steps. Or maybe with fewer steps, I guess, since Little Queen seems to be more directly derived from Fodra than Lambda was. We're seeing the origin of that impulse that gripped Lambda and Richard.
Is that what you're after?
Die, humans.
Stand strong.
I trust in the series too much. I think it's going to be more complicated than just looking to kill humans. The piano in it is fantastic. It puts me in mind of a lot of the discussions we had about the very melancholic and quiet piano in the main game, but reimagined in a upbeat, frenetic boss theme, which I'm a huge fan of. Oh man, yeah, listen to that. Great song. Give form to my will. That's a great indication. Let's keep that in mind as we learn more about it. Oh no.
Rejoin the stars.
Rejoin the stars. I'm wondering if we're going to get a broader cosmology here too, because I feel like she's talking a lot about the stars and wanting to rejoin them. And if she's embodying or serving as an avatar for the will of the planet, maybe it's something to do with wanting to reunite Fodra with like a broader solar system or something. Like it's isolated in a way that's not natural and that it doesn't desire. Yeah, that's pretty nuts. Tales games know how to do a good mob boss. Again, big Helganko energy coming through for me. I wanted to check, you might just know this, Grail, but I wasn't sure whether Sophie has her Excel finality yet. No, she doesn't. Bummer! I'm good at working on it now.
This cannot be.
Yes, but sadly not the other Douse thing. What the heck? One of my favorite ways for such an otherwise imposing antagonist to open the curtain on an epic game. It still felt like a bit of a shit show to me for what that's worth. But yeah, maybe more survivable than it's meant to be in your view.
There's no end to them.
Boy, Sophie looks
no.
broken in a very concerning way.
Come, child. We, all of us, we will ease your loneliness. Stay with us forever, an eternity, without sadness.
This is a really interesting setup, especially in the broader scheme of the Tales games and how they deal with community and loneliness, because as best I can tell from what little we've seen of the Little Queen and what she is suggesting to Sophie so far, it's like she's luring Sophie in based on anticipated loneliness rather than actual loneliness, which is also different from what happened with Lambda and Richard, note, because in the main game, they both had reason to feel as if they were very isolated and prone to betrayal, even though there were plenty of people who cared about Richard. You can see how, given the events with his uncle betraying him and everything, he would come to believe that. Whereas with Sophie, especially at this point, in Act 4 of this journey she's been on, she understands that she has friends, she has community, she's been adopted into the family of Asbel. The Little Queen is preying on her expectation that she will be lonely in the future once they're all dead, and basically saying any community or sense of companionship you have now is worthless because it is fleeting. So why not just preemptively throw that all away and come with us? That's a really interesting way to play with how we feel based on how we expect we will later feel, rather than just what's happening in the present or what we have evidence for based on the past.
Eternity without sadness.
Sophie, no!
Humans.
Use the Lambda power, Asbel.
Oh, this is bad.
Die.
What?
A Lambda shield?
It's Lambda.
Oh, that's awesome. You can tell he's coming to trust Asbel more, giving him powers that aren't just destructive, but protective of his community. Ugh, how far our little beaten and abused child has come since the main game, huh?
Lambda protected us?
Oh, I love that.
We await you, child of Fodra.
She's waiting.
Come on, Sophie.
Okay.
Worth bringing up again. I mean, despite how obvious it might seem to us that Sophie ought to stay with her community of friends, like you saw that look of uncertainty and fear in her eyes when she was looking at Asbel's eye, and talk about the relationships and the valences of her relationships in her life just being turned upside down, because now she's in a position of being protected by the thing that she was designed to kill, and the thing that she was modeled off of is calling her back to it, but that's also the thing that it's wrong for her to do. Like, you can see why from her perspective she would be so confused and disarmed, even if it seems obvious to us what the right choice is. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't need any convincing on that part, Grail. I'm with you 100%. It strikes me as just, frankly, a pretty superficial read if people want to say that the Little Queen is trying to do the same thing as Lambda. Because, I mean, think about what we're talking about, right? Yeah, they both kind of prey on loneliness, but there are so many deeper differences going on in terms of Lambda trying to cope with his abuse and trying to figure out how to trust in any community beyond himself, whereas now whatever Little Queen is concerned with and trying to do, it seems like she's not even an individual, like maybe she's the mouthpiece of an entire planet. She's also the origin of Sophie, so rather than something that Sophie was designed to destroy, if anything, I think part of what is hard about what Sophie is wrestling with in this context of, again, Lineage and Legacies is that she's seeing something that is supposed to be like her mother, something to which she's supposed to primordially relate, and yet it's kind of calling her back to the womb in a way that pulls her apart from everything from which she's derived value in her life and has given her a sense of humanity and identity. And it's kind of antithetical to Lambda in the sense that, like, Lambda, oh, I had it and I lost it. So Sophie wants to be human and is being pulled away from that humanity by Little Queen, whereas in the case of Richard, Lambda is this thing that was kind of made human without understanding the good parts of humanity, only given the distrust and the pain and the hurt, and so was pulling Richard into this well of deeply human but deeply self-destructive tendencies to self-isolate and try to cope by just pushing the rest of the world out and ultimately destroying the world. So yeah, I look at them just based on what we know now, not having been through the whole F arc, and their superficial similarity strikes me, not as something that is uninspired or rehashing the main story. Quite to the contrary, it seems like an interesting point of entry to showing that two entities that might similarly be addressing issues of loneliness can be doing so from such different perspectives and trying to achieve radically different things from that scheme with respect to different characters. Yes, agreed with you. I don't think it makes sense to read Destroy All Humans as just a record skip, so to speak.
Sai, is the shuttle fixed?
What should we do now?
I kind of want to check out the data I took from the lab.
Then perhaps we should return to tell us as to.
I think some rest will do us all a world of good.
You must be tired too, right, Sophie? You should get some rest. Asbel?
Right. Let's go back to tell us as to.
I think something that is also really sad and hard for Sophie for us to keep in mind, and perhaps why it's hard for her to put the pieces together or voice out loud that whatever Little Queen is, it has to be something like her mom, is, remember, speaking about the overall trajectory of these characters over the course of the story, Sophie's whole issue that she was navigating through the majority of the main game was, what is it to have a purpose? What is it to figure out how to move beyond one's inbred purpose and to instead choose purposes for oneself? How do I reconfigure myself from Protos Haze into someone who can be Sophie and live for her own reasons rather than what was programmed into me by Emerald? And I think when we heard that really touching moment earlier in Act 4 where Sophie was saying, I wish I could be human, I think part of what she was vocalizing was this desire for there to be something more to her identity and being that she could hold on to for those reasons for action and what it is that she values. To say, yeah, I get that I was a machine, I get that I was given this purpose to destroy Lambda, but if only I could be part of a broader heritage, if only I could be part of a family unit of the kind that Asbel later gives her, maybe I could feel more at liberty to live a life that is not defined in relation to that purpose or the fact that I was engineered. And then for her to find this being that she was molded from and who is kind of like her mother, for that being only to reject everyone else in Sophie's life and say they don't matter, they should be destroyed, you should just come live in eternity with us. That has to be so devastating to Sophie, because it's like she's found the true origin of herself in terms of a lineage, in terms of a family, only then for that family to be in many ways just as toxic as Emerald. So it's like whether it was your nature or your nurture, with the nature being more of the little queen side and the nurture being more of Emerald, Sophie comes from two kinds of bad stock, which of course isn't to say that she can't make her own decisions and make her own family. We've seen her do that across many, many hours at this point, but for her to have this deep validation that those two pillars in her life were kind of toxic and destructive only has to make it that much harder for her to hold firm to her own beliefs and her own identity, which she's worked so hard to sculpt. Yes, also very different character models. Mysterious multiple girls versus giant diffuse cloud of darkness. Very different vibes. No, but we'll never attribute it to you, Grail. That was just probably just the wind that said that. Alright. So we're going back to Telos Astu. Really bums me out that that's how it's pronounced. I really want it to be Telos Astwe.
Should we examine the data first?
There's probably a machine around here that can play it back.
Are you thinking about what that girl said?
Don't be fooled by her words, Sophie. They were designed to lower your defenses.
Hey, why don't you come rest with me? It's okay. I'm fine. But...
Okay, but if you need anything, just ask.
I think she's being toxic in an important and specific sense that is different from Emerald Grail. And this can be something for us to hold on to in the event that it comes up further in Act 4 as well. I feel like Little Queen is being toxic in the sense that we saw Sophie from the very beginning of Tales of Graces, like I was talking about earlier, not understand the emotional content of the world, but make a proactive effort to understand it through her relationships. She wanted to know, what does it mean when Asbel is smiling? When something happens, does that make you sad? What is the meaning of that? How should your friends interact with you if you're feeling sad? And that's part of what made Sophie into who she is, and why she can feel so human despite, at the end of the day, not really being human. Whereas Little Queen, as you say, maybe it seems like she's trying to be helpful, but I think the way in which she's being helpful is diametrically opposed to how Sophie came into the world, where Little Queen is nominally aware of emotions and coping with them by rejecting them entirely, saying, destroy all loneliness, destroy all sadness, destroy all humans because they're the source of all those things. Just, there's nothing to recommend all of these emotions that you would have to cope with, so let's just wipe it all away and not deal with it. And that, I think, the narrowness of it, the myopia of trying to basically constrain your experience of the world in order to better be able to cope with it, that I think is a specific kind of toxicity. And, you know, maybe more of a way of welcoming Sophie into the fold of humanity, right? Because I think many parents, different from the portraits of parents we've gotten so far in the game, are well-intentioned, but, you know, put their good intentions on their kids in ways that can be very toxic. Maybe we would want to say this about Aston. I don't know if we have a consensus on that at this point in the game, because I think it's unequivocal that he was well-intentioned. And now Hubert and Asbel seem to have a good relationship. I think it's a bit of an open question whether they have a good relationship entirely because of Aston, and Aston achieved what he wanted to, or if they kind of had to overcome the difficulties of their upbringing and bond over that. Maybe a little bit of both. But certainly I think Little Queen is that turned up to 11. Like, I don't think there's any question that she is more toxic a mom than Aston was a dad. Oh, we should heal before we go on. I'll point out too, again, I think a lot turns on what we learn about the nature of what Little Queen really is, because especially given, as you say, Grail, the fact that she is Legion, I feel like it's not obvious exactly whose voice she is emitting. Like, does she really have an intelligence in herself? Is she just parroting the will of the planet? And I think based on the nature of the intelligence behind her, that'll make a difference in terms of how we evaluate her actions and intentions, and whether she's morally blameworthy or praiseworthy or something different. That's kind of where I come down on it right now too, Grail. I think the thing that this game shows better and better the further you get into it, and the more hours you spend with these characters and the more windows into their past you get, is I think it's very easy to see in the beginning of the game, oh, you know, Aston is such a hard dad, he's so restrictive on his kids, and almost draw the inference that he's like an abusive dad because they're so unhappy with the way things are. But then you get more context and the kids grow up and you hear more about what Aston was going through, and it becomes very clear, oh, we were experiencing a period of these people's childhood through the narrative perspective of those kids. So of course they're not going to have a clear perspective on, you know, what their dad was really trying to achieve and how he cared for them. Someone who's just a very egotistical kid with big dreams like Asbel, of course he's going to be mad at the restrictions his dad puts upon him, and see his dad as someone who's evil when in effect he's actually a really good dad who's taking care of them and trying to set up their relationship for further down the line. Why you gotta tease me with that content we're never gonna get, man? Come on. I just had to deal with that going to and coming back from Japan. I don't need more of that in my life. Yes, and as we know, Grail, no playable characters ever go bad for any reason in any context. Alright, let's find a machine that can play this. Not the clock, I assume. You're a clock. You can't help us. Maybe up on the second floor? I always have trouble keeping the various regions of Telos S2 clear in my head. Yeah, that's kind of where I was headed by default. I think it's up here. Oh, I forgot to see if there were any cool new items we could dualize. Well, we can check it on the way out. Nope, that's not the room I was thinking of. Is it this room? Lounge? No. I don't think we've even been in this room before. Shame we rested at the inn. We have this whole cool lounge. Must be down in the basement then. Whether it's a metaphysical garden maze or a relatively simple city layout, chances are good Aaron's gonna get lost. Yeah, we'll have to talk about it more once we've seen the whole fourth act play out. For all the reasons we're talking about now, I remain keenly interested in where her character is going, but as I've said, I think a lot will turn on what happens between now and the conclusion. Damn, it was right in front of us the whole time. It really is an alien world.
The city appears safe for now.
But we'll be hard-pressed if any more of those monsters show up.
Yes, and it's only a matter of time until they do.
I'm concerned. If left unchecked, these creatures could wipe out all of Affinia too.
Okay, that should do it.
All members of the second research team have perished. They brought these samples back with their lives. We cannot let them go to waste. I agree. Very well. Proceed with the research. The core's current structure is similar to that of an immune system. So it's as if Fodra is trying to rid itself of a virus. And in this scenario, the virus is... Yes, I'm afraid so. The Little Queen's target is none other than humanity itself. Why? Why has Fodra forsaken us? How could this have happened? It's only a matter of time until the Little Queen arrives. Get out now, while you still can. No, sir. We are going to stay with you until the end. Then I assure you, you won't be here much longer. Sir, I'm afraid we have no choice but to shut down Fodra's core. But that will set the entire planet on a path to ruin. Sir, if we don't, there won't be any humans left on the planet.
Oh, you might be right, Grail. I was trying to place the voice.
However... Sir, there's
Yeah, I think you're right. Good ear.
Shut down the core.
We are here. We have heard your decision.
And we are really bummed about it.
The little queen.
Oh, Jesus.
Please, have mercy. Give us more time. We just want to live.
Die, human. We must destroy humanity. That is the reason for which we exist.
Kind of similar to
Was that all real?
Sophie's feeling during the first game that she had to destroy Lambda because that was the reason for which she existed. Maybe that's where we're going with it, the idea of these nested objectives that are inherited across the generations. Grail, not everyone has the physical ability to be a main party character. It's just a poor NPC, dude.
As far as I can tell, that all happened about 1,000 years ago. Why did Phodra turn on them?
Good question, but one that can wait. We have more pressing concerns right now.
Right. We need to find a way to stop the little queens.
Damn you, Hubert, putting a pin in all the questions I'm really interested in.
Is that even possible?
Well, I mean, we could try shutting down the core or whatever. That's what those scientists said in the video.
But did they succeed? It seems that they were killed before they could act.
Well, Phodra's core was shut down for almost 1,000 years. They must have found a way.
Well, I kinda sorta have an idea. But it involves Lambda.
I'm listening.
Interesting. If we have Lambda absorb the core's Eleth.
But what would happen to Asbel?
I would be unharmed, but I can't speak for you.
That's true. He is very deeply practical, Grail.
If I absorb the core's Eleth, it will pass through both your mind and your body. The strain would be too much for a fragile human to withstand.
A test of Asbel's spiritual growth and fortitude. A nice enlightenment check at the end of all his development that we talked about in the conclusion of the base game and thereafter.
If anything were to go wrong, your body and mind would be completely obliterated.
Smacks of Tales of the Abyss also.
Why didn't that happen to Richard?
Richard's body and his mind were almost completely under my control.
So a normal human can't handle the Eleth, but you can. Is that right?
What are you planning?
Lambda, I need a favor.
You are not hearing me, human. This procedure will utterly destroy you.
No, it won't.
It's too dangerous to rely on Lambda. And even if we did, Asbel could be torn apart in the process.
It's okay. I can do this.
You mustn't.
Don't be a fool. Think about what you're saying.
I have. I'm going to let Lambda take over temporarily.
What?
You're going to voluntarily let Lambda take control? That's madness.
It's not madness, Captain.
Don't do this! Lambda will absorb you, just as he did to me.
If that happens, you won't be Asbel anymore.
Guys, I'm just lending it to him. It's not permanent. And after I give up control, Lambda can absorb the Eleth and seal it inside himself.
Oh, I like this track too.
because Elith is only dangerous during the period where it's flowing. So Asbel's going to offer himself to Lambda for just that little bit of time. That would minimize the strain for sure, but...
Won't absorbing all that Elith allow Lambda to become active again?
That's a good point.
Do you really believe Lambda will just hand your body back once he's done?
Yes, I do. Lambda went out of his way to save us. We all saw it. If he was willing to do that, I'm willing to put my trust in him. Besides, we don't really have a choice. We have to shut down Fodra's core.
There's no doubt that Elith from the core is responsible for the new monsters around here.
And I bet it's responsible for the monsters on Affinia, too.
Asbel is correct. One way or another, we have to shut it down.
So that's why Lambda and I have to try.
What if it doesn't work? What if it fails and you're not you anymore?
I'll be fine.
How can you be so sure?
I told you I wanted to give Lambda a chance. I have to do this, Sharia, for a lot of reasons. So please, let me try. Look, this may not be a good plan, but it's all we've got. Are you with me?
All right, I'll leave this one to you. Besides, it's not like we could talk him out of it.
No, probably not.
Ever the pragmatist, like we were saying.
He's been living with Lambda for like a year now, right? I honestly think he'll be fine. What about you, Richard?
Asbel, are you absolutely sure about this?
I am.
Yeah, what could go wrong?
All right, the decision is made.
Boy, Richard really, you can feel the weight of everything he's carrying after what he went through in the main game. And what he can't even speak. Oh, and listen to just Sharia crying in the background. This is heavy, man. This is
We rest
heavy.
tonight and head out first thing in the morning.
Okay.
I was just thinking
You need
the
to find a way
exact
to
same
set their
thing.
minds at ease.
Great minds, Grail.
Once we board the shuttle, we can't afford any last-minute regrets. Understand?
Asbel, if you turned into Lambda, I'd have to resume my mission.
That's not gonna happen. He's different from before. I know it's hard, but you just have to trust him.
Trust Lambda.
Well, the 40-year-old party dad would be the right person to talk everyone into having those scenes, wouldn't he be, Grail? Yeah, trust Lambda. How is that even possible? I was just trying to see if we could get to a save point so we could wrap things up. No, I don't arrest for the evening. I know, man. I don't want to wait for Friday either. Can we not get out of the room to save? Am I a crazy person? It's not even giving us the opportunity to find people, though. It's just giving us the prompt to rest for the night. So I guess we can safely rest. I mean, there's nothing to do here. My game plan is just Aaron wants to find a save point and then say a few... Oh, we need to do the Flanor scenes now? That sucks. All right, well then maybe I'll just put the PS3 into rest mode and we can just do it next time on Friday. Because yeah, I don't want to belabor things that much later. Yes, Grail, I'm so glad that you said it so that I wasn't the one who had to. I think that was an amazing scene. The more we play of Act 4, the more I'm having this feeling, which I oftentimes feel when we have the pleasure of working through content that was added to a Tales game after its initial release, of just asking myself, how the heck did they release a version of this game that didn't include this? Far from being redundant, as you were suggesting people might feel between Lambda and Little Queen Grail, I feel like this extends and touches on so many unresolved questions and issues at the conclusion of Act 3 in a way that just I can already feel is setting things up to have a much more holistic and satisfying conclusion. Not that the end of Act 3 isn't, but you can tell that everything that they're wrestling with in Act 4 is warranted as issues for them to confront, because it was very much stuff that was left on the table at the end of the first game. I so love how it seems like, whereas in the first game we had this little like almost vacation jaunt to the alien world of Fodra, only to get enough context about Lambda to come back and finish things on Affinia. Now things are reversed, where in order to understand what's at stake with something like the lineage of Sophie and the origin of monsters in the world, we really have to go back and confront the source. So now it seems like we're properly ending things on Fodra. And we're ending things on Fodra where, as I was being suspicious of the last couple streams, we're finally in a position to learn a lot more about what was going on in the background and motivating the events of the base game. Like, now we're actually coming to understand why Fodra started to die as a planet, why its core was turned off, and why it needed to become a parasite on Affinia using its Listalia in the way that we experienced in the main game. And I think that scene was just so, I mean, obviously so beautifully directed, like we've talked about in the case of many of the scenes in Tales of Graces, but it's got me tuned into just what an interesting setup this is. And I'll tell you, I've said this before, but the further we get into Tales of Praxis, the more interesting each subsequent game we look at is, because I can see, and we can see and talk about together, the intersection of different mechanics and pieces of storytelling and thematic concerns from the different games, and then ask the question, all right, why is this game using these different mosaic tiles in this way, and what is it that it's trying to express? So, especially given that we're already over time, I won't belabor it here, but I want to put in your head what I'm thinking of, and then, as you say, Grail, we can dive into the Friday stream, thinking about Flanor scenes and resolutions, and also just thinking about these different Tales threads that are all present here. So what's really interesting to me about what we just saw is it feels like the intersection of three very different but interestingly related things from three very different Tales games. Excuse me, it's getting late. Clearly we need to wrap up. But I'm really interested because it seems like we're getting a vivid portrait of a planet that has certain intentions it's expressing, with the idea of its core as an immune system that's trying to purge humanity from it, which is fascinating to me because I kind of assumed that Tales of Arise was the first game that did that, and that's clearly not the case. But really interesting as a point of contrast, because just based on what little we know at this point about the Little Queens and this immuno-response of Fodra versus what it was that the great astral spirit of Rena wanted to rectify the world and put all the astral energy back where it belonged, feels like two very different intentions of these planets. And so I think it'll be an interesting kind of counterpoint as we consider the question, what does it mean for a planet to want something and express its will through its inhabitants, as we're getting another picture of that. So that's one. The second one, which I gestured at in that scene, was I think, at least off the top of my head, Tales of the Abyss really stands apart in the way in which it focuses on a portrait of self-sacrifice, where a particular character decides to be this kind of messianic hero by taking in and reconfiguring all the energy of the universe at the cost, at least potentially, of the not fidelity, but the integrity, the integrity of his personal individual physical form, right? Luke decides he's going to use his abilities as a seventh phonist to basically, through a hop, skip, and a jump, redeem and save the whole world. But he recognizes that it may very well cause him to disappear from the world, in a very similar vibe to what we have now, with Asbel recognizing he needs to absorb the Elith from Fodra, but he doesn't really know what's going to come of it. And then third, and I won't say too much about this because I still really want to avoid spoiling as much of this game as possible, in the event that I can just get people to become more aware of it by playing it on the stream. But Tales of Eternia, I think it doesn't wear it on its sleeve, but I think it's a game that is very concerned with the idea of what does it mean to channel and embody a certain spirit that is beyond ourselves, especially something that is divine, and how can we do that in a way that enlarges our consciousness without losing ourselves in the process. And that's something that I see coming through loud and clear too, as an extension of Asbel recognizing he needs to trust Lambda and give over control of himself to Lambda, leaning into that territory we talked about before of Asbel kind of acting as an avatar for Lambda, and now giving Lambda more of the reins to steer Asbel, and Asbel willfully acknowledging that he's not going to be able to know what comes of that until it's too late to change his mind, right? So as I think about and spell those three threads out, I think it's set up to be a really interesting kind of spiritual and esoteric confrontation of what it means to place yourself in this kind of cosmic position where you can change the world, but only by surrendering control of your agency to something greater than yourself, and something which you have to trust has been redeemed and can be redeemed through that activity. Lambda, right? Something that was evil in the past, now hopefully not. And I'm really excited to see how that all unfolds as we march forward here. You did, Grail. I remember you grumbling about Arise cribbing things from Graces, but like I said, I mean that's why we're doing this Praxis stuff, right? It's great to have them all on the table, and I think it's the beginning, not the end of the conversation, right? To notice that point of similarity, because for all that they borrow from each other, I think there's no doubt in either of our minds that Graces is concerned with saying some very different things than Arise is. And so considering how it is that their different themes arise, pun intended, from those similar forms of content, I think is part of what makes this really interesting and rewarding. I know. Well, and it's an interesting arc for Lambda too, right? Because remember, Act 3 ends with Asbel basically saying, let me show you the world, and Lambda saying basically like, I'm so tired, I just need to rest and hang out for a while. And so, as best we can tell, that's basically what he does, right? Just quietly observe, take things in, and then not really come back to life until he's called upon. So an interesting kind of call and response of Asbel saying, look, I'm going to do this for you. I hope to change your mind, and then I want you to kind of prove to me that your mind has been changed, because we're going to need you, and I'm going to need to be able to trust in you. And again, keep in mind that theme with which we began this stream, the idea that as much as it hasn't been foregrounded as an instance of one of these, I think Asbel's relationship with Lambda, well, more complex with this, certainly has the color to it of a father-son relationship. And so we've seen another one of those multi-generational connections unfurl itself through this stream with Sophie and Little Queen. So watching that dynamic interplay with the dynamic between Asbel and Lambda, and remembering all the crisscrossing dynamics of Sophie's directive to kill Lambda, and what happens if Asbel, the man who made Sophie human and a part of his family, becomes Lambda, I think will lend itself to some really interesting and nuanced insights of the kind that can only really come to the fore once you've had, almost 90 hours of character development. People complain about JRPGs being long, but all the stuff that we're working through now and how rich and rewarding and existentially useful it is, it's not rocket science. We're able to have these conversations because these games compound in value and insights in what it is that they're trying to express by methodically building upon each character moment, each scene, each act over that amount of time. And then you arrive at, we'll see, but hopefully some conclusions worth thinking about and dwelling on quite a bit more. Let's put a pin in that, Grail. We should definitely get a list going of things we want to discuss once we're properly done with Graces. I think there's no doubt that F as an arc is concerned with this notion of parenthood. It would be really interesting to look beyond that and ask, can we read the whole game as a meditation on parenthood? Because it really wasn't something that came up to me that much during the main game. Obviously, you have everything with Aston and thinking about Asbel and Hubert's family and the Lant family, but in terms of the broader ecosystem of that base game, it wasn't really something that was at the front of my mind. But as we've talked about before, one of the coolest things about additional content is that they can comment on and recontextualize a lot of the story that has come before and lead you to think about the whole in a totally different way, speaking in favor of different themes. So let's definitely plan to revisit that once we conclude here. Nature versus nurture. Yes, put that on the list too. You don't have to literally make a list, but it'll be useful if one of us does. Because I see nature versus nurture, like we were talking about with Sophie, as something that intuitively at least sounds like more of a through line through it all. But we will see, and we'll have plenty to discuss. We might even need a whole stream just for the post-game discussion for this, honestly, because even more than what we went through with Berseria and Zestiria, there just seems to be so much here in this single unit of Tales storytelling, even though it never reached beyond itself in terms of a proper sequel or something like that. It seems all the more monolithic for that reason, and sophisticated in its monolithicism. How's that for a neologism? All right. Well, I think you know how I feel about the common complainers about these games at this point, Grail. But hey, look, that's why we do this, to give them deeper looks, and hopefully between inviting more people into the fold of these live book clubs and getting more people engaged through these articles, more of which are on the way. Keep an eye out for that. We can get some more people to, if not change their minds, at least New Game Plus these works with some new appreciation in mind and see some new things in it. Yes, Grail, I had fun too. It's always fun with you, always a pleasure. And likewise with you, Pottery. Sorry you had to jet. Hope you had a good dinner. Looking forward to seeing you on Friday. If anyone else was lurking, feel free to keep lurking, but feel free to join the conversation. As with a JRPG, it's all the more fun when there are more voices involved. But yes, you know that we're working towards the end of a meaningful story worth considering when we have something like 15 minutes of conversation just anticipating the end of its fourth act, not even at the end yet. So I think I've put my cards on the table in terms of what I'm excited about, what to keep an eye on as we go forward here. Think about what's on the top of your mind too, what questions you still want answered, what themes you're considering, and we can dive forward and see what the game has to say about all of that and more. And yes, Grail, I will keep an eye out for that too. You know at this point how excited I am for that. So that'll be a lot of fun. Really excited. Looking forward to Exilia also. I don't think I said this stream, but we've been saying the last few. I'll post something on the socials at some point. Definitely the plan after this is that once we wrap on Grace's F, I'll be continuing to work through all of my background playthroughs and publications on the games, but for the next live book club, we're going to take on and sink our teeth into the Exilia duology of 1 and 2. So I'm excited for that. I've played through the beginning of Exilia more than once, never gotten all the way through it, and have never touched Exilia 2. So it'll be a really fun way to kind of put a wrap on one part of the Tales of Praxis series, but also march on into a whole other level of intertextual study and celebration of these great works. All right, that's what I've got. I won't prolong the conclusion any longer, except to say it's always a pleasure. Grail, you take care. Padre, if you're watching the VOD, and anyone else who's hanging out, I hope you think well and game well. We'll be back same time on Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern, to ring in the weekend and continue ringing out and celebrating this masterpiece, Tales of Graces F. Until then, my friends, be good. I'll see you next time. I'm Aaron Suduko, your host, the founder of With a Terrible Fate. Cheers.